At the very start of this journey, my gaze caught sight of her silhouette, which was smoothly descending against the bright disk of the full moon. Behind him, a bear was approaching with powerful steps. His cursed greed had led him too deep into the mountain thickets. This very thought was pounding his temples with pain. His foot slipped on the slippery stones, and only by a miracle did the man keep his balance, almost not falling to the ground. The protagonist didn't have time to ask if anything bad had happened when he rushed to stop the unknown animal. However, the man, seized by panic, shouted that the creature was still chasing him, not backing down a single step. The huge creature, which had just been managed to cope with, made a stunning impression with its appearance. The stranger, unable to restrain his admiration, said how good it was that fate had brought him here. It instantly flashed through his mind that before him was a real daredevil and fearless adventurer. However, the young man quietly noted that such fame was clearly not to his liking. Reflecting on the events, the man came to the conclusion that the monster must have been wounded. The realization that fate had favorably intervened on his side, and that only a minor scratch had resulted from the boy's intervention, brought relief. And suddenly genuine surprise flashed across his face. The awareness of the growing pain revealed. Inside, broken ribs pressed against the lungs with acute anxiety, and threatened an explosion of uncontrollable rage. The stranger acted almost unconsciously, in captivity of his own instincts. After all, he served the monster lord, the sworn enemy of humanity. There was no doubt left. In front of the main character, a real monster. But despite everything, it was this enemy who from now on became his patient. A wondrous spark of magic gave birth in his hands to a sword, forged from the very radiance of magical energy, in search of something hidden in the monster's guts. Apologizing for his perhaps overly harsh behavior, he decided not to interfere any further. The remaining wounds were destined to heal without his involvement. Thoughts of his own death did not leave him. The suspicion that this was exactly what the stranger wanted was firmly embedded in his mind. When asked how he was doing, the monster remained unmoved, not saying a word. The man instantly understood the reason for this silence, but the stranger did not understand anything. The answer came with incredible ease: absolutely not. A moment later, it became clear. A rare male bear was standing before him. Fury seized the beast when the man dared to take his cubs. It was this uncontrollable anger that made the wounded bear rush after him like a wild element. But at that time, the hero had no idea of the real reason for the pursuit. To everyone's surprise, the answer was unexpectedly calm. The young man managed to solve the mystery of the disappearance of his eggs on his own. The protein fans notice that they also have a heart. If you open your ears a little wider, you can catch the barely audible whisper of the animals themselves. The newcomer needs to familiarize himself with the surroundings, so he will be driven straight to the base. At first, no guesses slipped through their minds as to the identity of the stranger, who was distinguished by extraordinary strength, healing abilities, and awareness of monsters. Only later did the new acquaintance reveal his name, Zeke Fettel, and the girl, a veterinarian, was called Ari. The cow was given a therapeutic vaccine, and within a moment the animal came to life, its condition noticeably improved. The owner and his daughter could not hide their surprise at such a rapid recovery. Expressing his gratitude to the veterinarian, the owner admitted that he now felt indebted to him. However, the veterinarian only modestly brushed off the praise. The girl, fascinated by the wonderful glow that enveloped the earth, asked, "What kind of amazing light was this?" The owner explained that the glow was a sign of the veterinarian's special skill, because it was thanks to this that he was such an extraordinary person. Intrigued, the girl asked if she could ever have a similar gift. Her father, however, noted that not everyone can do something like this. But Zeke disagreed, confidently saying that the decisive factor was not the presence of talent, but a sincere willingness to help others. They reminded her that excessive modesty was inappropriate here, because Zeke was not just a talented craftsman, but perhaps even superior to his own father. However, the young man stood his ground. He was still far from his father's level. He did not dare to compare himself. His father was unsurpassed. He was no longer there, Zeke said calmly, and added, he had already come to terms with the loss. The girl felt sympathy and softened. The young man's frankness touched her, and she decided not to hide her true emotions any longer. In order not to accidentally say something unnecessary this time, Nitz gently suggested that they temporarily leave the lizard without attention. Ariane turned to the owner with a thoughtful look. After saving the cow was left behind, other worries were already swirling in his soul. Noticing this, the woman asked what thoughts had suddenly taken hold of him. The stable turned out to be stuffy, the ventilation barely works, and a thick layer of manure completely blocked the flow of fresh air. A thorough cleaning is long overdue. In addition, in the very corner stands Taurus, who has completely faded and weakened since the last meeting. Let me assure you, he needs to be moved before it gets even worse. They are interested in how the protein is distributed. According to the man, the concentrate was used excessively, and the interlocutor confirms this point of view. Slow movements and heavy breathing betray the extra weight in these creatures. Laziness and indecision are evident in every step. Each has its own role. Strict instructions descend from the top, like laws of nature. It seems as if the management wants the animals to gain even more fat. And yet Zeke could not believe that the owner would endanger his own family. The realization of the correctness of his interlocutor's words suddenly struck him. The hours that had been counted for the execution of the order melted before his eyes. The order had been received last month, and there was almost no time left. Despite the fact that this whole whirlwind of events had bypassed him, the veterinarian felt the invisible presence of this matter in the air, like a shadow pursuing its victims. The silence was suddenly cut by a sharp telephone call. A mature, husky voice asked what brought him to this place and why he was here. To this, the main character said, he is currently on duty at the East Ranch, conducting a routine inspection according to the schedule. Indignation filled his soul. The usual procedure for inspecting livestock took no more than half an hour. Zeke nodded in response, but noted that even the simplest tasks often took too much effort. It seemed that before him was only a man who was making excuses for himself. What was the point of wasting time on them? They would get the meat anyway. The man remained silent. A rude shout made him turn back immediately. Zeke only replied dryly that he was in a hurry. The girl could not help but notice how difficult this service was for him, although on his face was read the resignation of a man who was accustomed to such things. He was horrified by this indifference. Everyone knew how much effort a veterinarian expended, but the wealthy and prominent people walked past indifferently, not even trying to realize the efforts of others. For most people, it was more important to appear to be benefactors than to actually be one. No wonder, Zeke reasoned, that these people were so careless and cold in their attitude towards animals. A man among the locals said that with the arrival of the new king, livestock farming had declined, and now they had only one veterinarian left. It could still be considered luck, but in reality the peasant did not hide it. He would rather see Zeke leave here and show his abilities somewhere where they would be truly appreciated, rather than waste his life in this wilderness. However, in his heart, the idol stubbornly disagreed. He could not simply turn his back on these people and leave. The neighbor insisted, "If you think only of yourself, then this is what you should do." However, Zeke only smiled softly. These words were like a pleasant melody to him. The minister is almost bursting with rage. It's time to leave before it gets worse. However, this is not his last appearance here. The man whose orders he follows has ordered to take care of everyone, although he himself has always demanded to take care of only himself. Meanwhile, Zik approaches Kaixian. With her, he is waiting for the way home. The veterinarian's gaze clearly caught the moment when her alertness made it clear that his words had reached their goal, and probably made her think. I dreamed of going abroad in search of a new, happy life, but my heart wouldn't let me leave people like these behind. They had become too dear to me. Looking at it from a different angle, life here doesn't seem so bad at all. Suddenly, Kai-chan's gaze caught something in the distance, and in a moment the boy was running in that direction. Turning to Kaya-chan, she asked him to stop because the path to the capital runs in the completely opposite direction. She caught a glimpse of the creature and immediately mistook it for a dog. Wounded, he expressed sincere gratitude for her care and tender care. The body was covered only with cuts and bruises, no serious injuries. Smiling slightly, the man apologized cautiously and warned that the treatment might cause some pain. To undergo a medical examination, traces of poison in the creature's blood immediately revealed the ogre's insidious attack. The pitiful little animal trembled, whimpering softly in unbearable pain. I had no doubt for a moment that nothing would happen to her. Medical practice confidently suggested that an experienced specialist had taken on the case. One injection is enough, and the pain will instantly subside. The veterinarian asked the furry patient to freeze. The surprisingly clean, soft fur caught his eye. It was obvious that this animal had been well cared for. Why did it end up in such a mess? Meanwhile, Kai-chan noticed something unusual. Huge monsters loomed menacingly out of the darkness. It became clear at first glance she was to be their prey. Confusion overwhelmed the young man. What was the reason for the chase if these monsters didn't even intend to eat the girl? Zeke tried to calm the attack, but his calls dissolved into thin air. No one even reacted. Avoiding harm to them would have been the best option, but the animals remained unbridledly aggressive. Zeke's categorical protest against this development was obvious. The monsters fell to the ground with a dull thud. It would seem that what could he do with his two healing abilities? However, it is at such moments that these skills become a real salvation. The teacher expressed his gratitude and quickly disappeared into the crowd. A thought occurred to me. Had this creature gotten lost in these places? Wasn't it a monster? His behavior suggested an attempt to say something. After making sure that everything was fine with the girl, he stopped paying attention to the little things. Quickly gathering his things, he set off towards home, accompanied by Kai Chen. Announced the release of S. Curious, the ruler delved into the reasons. Having before him the minister's report, he learned, Z-Kit spends on the care of livestock amounts that far exceed the real needs of the farm. For him, livestock are just speechless creatures intended for breeding, slaughtering, and eating. In his opinion, wasting such funds on treating animals does more harm than good. He skillfully justifies all his actions with concern for health and nature. But even if the entire herd dies, only a few newborns are enough to make up for the losses. The master calculated that by getting rid of him, he would be able to significantly reduce unnecessary expenses and direct the saved funds to the prosperity of the kingdom. The man fully shared this decision, and the king also supported a similar idea. Asking if the young man wanted to add anything, the ruler gave him the floor. The young man, after thinking for a moment, only sincerely apologized for all the inconvenience. The explanation was clear. Livestock farming is not as easy as the minister tries to convince us. Lack of careful care and proper control threatens a rapid decline in productivity, and sometimes its complete loss due to an outbreak of disease. In addition to performing his basic duties, the main character also takes care of controlling the combat monsters that are in the service of the national army. Only special techniques can tame the innate rage of the Hexenbeasts. Otherwise, the country will face numerous losses and catastrophic destruction. The minister noted that Zeke might not even realize that a super-powerful magical tool, specially designed for this purpose, had recently appeared. The young man himself had not yet heard of this novelty. One has only to try on this training artifact, and the strongest magical creatures or even tamed beasts instantly become submissive. In other words, as long as this tool is in someone's hands, Zika has no chance. Indignation gripped his entire being as he realized these things were stripping animals of all life, turning them into soulless objects. Disregard for their feelings and dignity would sooner or later inevitably return with terrible consequences. The gentleman's opinion was that Zeke's words were nothing but delusions. The king, for his part, considered them nonsense. After all he had done to the state, all the deceptions he had made about his own knowledge, Zeke certainly deserved punishment. However, his merits were not overlooked either. The king was ready to show leniency, exactly as much as he really deserved. On the shore of the reservoir, the young man was lost in thought, exhaling from fatigue every now and then. The feeling of powerlessness gripped his heart. All his efforts to become a worthy replacement for his father were shattered by the cruel reality. With the advent of the new king, everything around him had lost its usual order. The only consolation was Kai Tian's sincere support. Gradually, the boy realized that animals are not toys to be ruthlessly disposed of. They are living creatures with souls, capable of inspiring and lifting spirits when the world seems gloomy. It was at this moment that Kai-chan, with a cheerful light in her eyes, pushed him into the water. And, accepting the game, Zeke acknowledged her triumph with a slight smile. Suddenly, the young man's gaze caught something unusual. The unexpected appearance enchanted him. The girl's beauty instantly stunned him. A few steps, and the distance between them disappears. Looking him straight in the eye, she quietly admits how much she missed him and sincerely thanks him. She introduced herself as Tiffany, but insisted on being called simply T. Deciding to accept his invitation, the girl went to his house. When the guy said his name, it immediately appealed to her. Apparently, it was the puppy he had saved earlier that was now before his eyes. His intuition was right. It was exactly as it had been. Over the years, a real monster gradually grew inside her. In farewell, only a cold goodbye. He wanted to help the defenseless dog, not to be next to such an unusual girl. But T casually denied that everything was not as it seemed. Only after experiencing those changes and becoming a puppy did he finally manage to believe her words. The question came out of nowhere. Was she a monster because she had never heard of a creature turning into a human before? Hearing this, the girl indignantly denied that she did not consider herself a monster. The boy seemed to be completely unfamiliar with the monster gods. The explanation was clear. These creatures came from the depths of the ages, carrying a power that could be compared to the might of the gods. All of them were controlled by the Lord of the Divine Beasts, like a thunderbolt. The Divine Beast Lord's daughter had appeared to personally invite him. Such an unexpected honor stunned Zeke and threw him off his guard. Naragma is a land of water, endless green meadows, and a variety of animals, and its fate is ruled by the Lord of Divine Beasts. Under his care, this land finds harmony and protection, and it is with care and understanding that he extends a helping hand to every creature, even one as mysterious as the creature that unexpectedly appeared on their path. The confessions are full of sincerity. There are many things that are beyond her power, but she will not refuse a request for help. Lonely and a little confused after the exile, it was the gentle offer of support that became a real, unexpected consolation. Such care brought her true joy. Therefore, Zeke hurried to pack things for Nirog. A fragile paw slid almost silently down his arm. A light glow ran through his body. He felt it immediately. The girl announced with a smile that the agreement had been fulfilled. The pact with the divine beast reveals the secret depths of its power and grants truly extraordinary power. If there are any remaining doubts or questions, now is the time to voice them. Zek fully comprehended and accepted everything he heard. Finally, it was time to pack up. T lay down on the bed, pretending to be more comfortable, and with a cheerful smile wished everyone a good night's sleep. Such carelessness really touched the main character, causing him internal indignation. She invited him to spend the night together, but the young man was not at all attracted by such an offer. The unexpected proposal to spend the night with Kai Chek flew from her lips, generating tension and excitement. In front of the farmer's house, Ariets appeared to say goodbye for the last time. Zeke, restraining his emotions, admitted how much he would miss these people, but he could no longer stay here. The owner, although he did not trust the new authorities, confidently promised that they would manage on their own here, if only Zeke would choose a safe path for himself. In farewell, the guy sincerely thanked them for the support and for everything they had experienced together. A heated argument broke out between the master and Tiffany. The master calmed everyone down, noting that he was lucky to have such reliable companions, and therefore there was no reason for concern. The main character, meanwhile, hastened to apologize for the uproar. Deciding to leave the room, the boy saw that a tense argument was raging inside about a case that directly affected him. He wondered if T had conveyed anything. When the girl replied that nothing important had happened, another voice suddenly reached his ears. However, he did not care about this. Seizing the mood of the moment, he quickly began to gather his things. Despite Kai-chan's rapid speed, this journey will take 5 full days. A journey that will greatly test patience and strength. The atmosphere around the trip became more lively when a proposal was made to add some fun. However, the serenity instantly changed. Unexpectedly, Kai-chan exploded with anger. The reason for such a sudden change of mood remained a mystery to the main character, and he tried in vain to understand what had happened. While his thoughts were wandering in doubt, the silhouette of a stranger appeared on the horizon. For a moment it seemed like a person appeared before me, but T immediately noticed. It was just a harp. A Class A monster had grown up in front of her. Where did it come from? Although her mind told her to stay away, the vet had already started his own game. Kai-chan stood right in front of her. The number of injured monsters had suddenly increased in recent days, and it was already clearly noticeable. The warning came in a tense whisper. The boy noted her wound with concern and reached out to help, but she skillfully slipped from his grasp. A flash of determination prompted her to attack the enemy. Meanwhile, the juice had enveloped her in a spell of sleep. Remaining steadfast in his belief that everything would be fine, the boy acted with incredible calm. Tiffany never ceased to wonder what prompted him to help her. When she asked, he briefly stated he was a doctor. Moreover, the reason for the insane behavior of these monsters was the curse of the demon lord. They were not to blame for their own loss of mind. The embrace wrapped him tightly and warmly. Before her eyes appeared the true image of Zeke, the same one who had inspired her since her youth. With such confidence, even the proud harpy would be confused. Meanwhile, the main character carefully reminded, no unnecessary words. He explained meaningfully, the monsters are under a powerful curse, so it is almost impossible to tame them. However, he remembered how he still took care of these creatures in the kingdom. He also added that this path is too difficult and long, because getting rid of the curse is not a quick matter and requires patience. Suddenly, without a moment's hesitation, Bee rushed to Zeke, hugged him tightly, and sincerely opened her heart, confessing her true feelings. Zeke froze in surprise for a moment. Such sincerity came as a complete surprise to him. Delighted by his own victory over a monster of incredible power, he realized with surprise he had no idea that hidden forces were so subject to him. Even in his wildest fantasies, he never imagined how powerful his power would become after signing the contract. It's unbelievable, after all, this deal was made only last night. The harpy endlessly declares her love for him, and Zeke is surprised to notice. It turns out that she can really talk. However, Tai quickly explains everything. The acquired abilities have reached such a level that he now understands the language of creatures. The realization came unexpectedly. Everything that was happening was part of the intended contract. Tiffany later emphasized that it was his unique skills that had led them to this turn of events. But despite her confidence, a doubt was arising in her soul that did not give peace. Holding Kai on both sides, the two firmly announced their intention to leave him. This turn of events was not at all part of Kai-chan's plans, and caused him considerable indignation. Kaya-chan's heart burns with love for him, but all her feelings remain unnoticed. An awkward situation forces the guy to ask Kaya not to take any unnecessary steps, but unexpectedly he realizes the true meaning of her confession. Of course, after all, she is a monster too. With eyes full of tears, Kai-chan finally admits his lie to her. To suddenly throw himself into someone's arms like that. It seems that his fascination with mammals has gotten the better of him. The realization that breasts were particularly arousing made him unconsciously squeeze them harder. However, asking him not to complicate the situation only added fuel to Kai-chan's irritation. He searched in vain for words to tell her that everything had happened differently than she had thought. But even after so many years, his feelings remained the same. In his eyes, she was still the most precious thing. It is unlikely that the hero ever imagined that the moment would come when a request would fly from his lips to Kai-chen. Suddenly, their destination appeared before their eyes. A casual smile appeared on Zeke's lips as he casually remarked that they were still days away from their destination, so it was no use joking. However, the entrance to Naragma, the famous Mikuni Gate, was already looming majestically ahead. Without any hesitation, they rushed forward and arrived just in time, although they still didn't fully understand what was going on. As soon as the divine beast was revealed to the villagers, everyone immediately realized that Mrs. Tai was among them again. Nicole had already crossed paths with Kenneth Doubts, but now he had more than just a girl, a true princess. From the lips of our guest came the news of a bountiful harvest gathered in the outside world, and she brought with her a human doctor. Having called his name, the mysterious stranger immediately attracted attention. Recognition flashed in the eyes of the villagers. Here was the very savior that the divine beast had foretold. Never before had a creature of human form appeared in these lands, and in the company of a monstrous monster. My heart was racing with fear. Had I blurted out something unnecessary? Tiffany quickly reassured me that everything was fine. Nothing terrible had happened. We were just a little confused, because it was rare for anyone to be among people here. He understood their wariness well. Not long ago, humans had been brutally persecuting beastmen, forcing them to hide deep in the forests. Such caution seemed quite natural. After a short pause, the man turned to Miss Tiffany. In advance for his reaction, sincerely considered it a normal reaction for a stranger. At that moment, Miss Tiffany approached him. The fragrant apples from her basket were so tempting, so it is not surprising that she treated the princess to them. She ate the treat with pleasure, clearly enjoying the taste. And Zico, having tasted the apple, was also delighted, and the girl easily guessed that the boy wanted more. The supply of fruits was more than enough, and besides, their cozy shop was not far away. Tiffany, infected with joy, went after the princess with laughter, and the boy, noticing their haste, jokingly urged the girls not to run away so quickly. We almost ended up under the hooves of horses pulling a heavy cart. Chan reacted instantly, picking up the girl, while the protagonist calmed the frightened horse down with authority. Nearby, he managed to collect the scattered teeth on the ground. The girl turned out to be unharmed and sincerely thanked him for the help. Having made sure that everything was fine with her, the young man sighed with relief. Meanwhile, guards had already appeared around, warily assessing the situation. Smiling, the girl assured him that nothing terrible had happened. One of the guards voiced a question that had been hanging in the air for a long time. Why was the man aiming at the divine being? They ordered him to be taken to the castle. A death sentence awaited both the rider and his steed. Suddenly, Zeke intervened and stopped the course of events. An experienced veterinarian carefully examined the horse and discovered that the animal had a severe sprain and inflammation of the hoof. The question about the regularity of hooves trimming sounded desperate. Walking on stones with such wounds was like stepping barefoot on sharp splinters. The owner only blushed and apologized, and Zeke, swallowing his disappointment, was already considering his new plan. First aid was provided promptly. From now on, the animal was no longer in danger on the way back. The owner was only required to take more care and attention to his horse. Having received the necessary thing, the man sincerely promised to be careful in the future. The circumstances were completely unintentional, so Zeke sincerely asked for forgiveness, urging him to replace his resentment with compassion. Tiffany has no doubt that he will never repeat such a step again. According to the protein experts, the girl's unexpected appearance was too reckless. Embarrassed, she hastened to apologize for such impulsiveness. Zach. As Mrs. T had predicted, everything happened exactly as she had said. It was he who extended a helping hand to her, supported her, and gave her the strength to get up. The words of gratitude for the rescue, both his own and the horse's, got stuck somewhere in his throat, unable to find a way out. The guard, still shocked by what he had experienced, openly expressed his deep gratitude for the support in a difficult moment. The girl also did not hide her sincere joy and gratitude, is pleased to hear that everyone is sincerely supporting Sika. Her heart is filled with hope that one day they will be able to understand each other even more deeply and turn their acquaintance into a strong friendship. Resolute protest was not long in coming. The girl made it clear that Zeke was her property. The princess defiantly challenged the boy, reminding everyone of his special status as an invited guest. The hostess ordered the servants to address him with the utmost respect. For his convenience, one of the best rooms in the guest wing was specially prepared, leaving it completely at his disposal. As she said goodbye, she mysteriously assured that their next meeting would certainly take place. Her words caused sincere surprise not only in him, but also in Kai Chen. Leading the guests into the room, she assured them of her readiness to come to their aid as soon as the need arose. The news that T was actually a princess stunned him and filled his heart with excitement. Such an unexpected truth seemed incredibly exciting. Approval creates the illusion of support, but how does the rest of her family really feel about him? In everything except medicine, success seems to elude him. Kai-chan remains dissatisfied. In her eyes, Zeke is the embodiment of experience, care, and true strength. His smile instantly arouses sympathy wherever he appears. She is indifferent to that puppy, but better than others she is able to understand the true essence of the person she is looking at. The news of her feelings filled his heart with joy. The conversation he had longed for gave him special pleasure. At this moment, Zeke wondered, isn't this the same interracial friendship that everyone talks about? After a short pause, he admitted that the presence of this girl next to him really pleased him. Her thoughts, meanwhile, were absorbed by doubts about racial differences. Suddenly, a desperate cry for help tore through the air. Thanks to their unerring sense of human presence, they moved swiftly and confidently. Passing 2 rooms, they suddenly noticed 2 strangers making their way through the window, dragging a bulky bag behind them. Without a moment's hesitation, they rush in that direction with Kai Chen. Audacious kidnappers who dared to take the girl by force. The kidnappers had no idea who their victim really was. They calmly hid behind their skillfully honed disguise, confident in their own invisibility. They did not foresee any danger, confidently heading towards an irreversible mistake. Not the first time he had found himself in such circumstances, Zeke had easily calculated their route, skillfully tracking every hint of presence. The others noticed that this guy was a real ace in the pursuit. However, in response to their surprised looks, Zeke only smiled mysteriously, saying that these were just the fruits of medical knowledge, along with the scary monster. Napper's guest also appeared. With a slight smile, the man advised the boy, "If you're thinking of asking a girl out, it's better to choose something simpler. Too risky ideas can only scare her away." The attackers rushed at the hero, but a quick movement and one of them froze, paralyzed once and for all. The other instantly realized that he was facing a real battle sorcery. The words were already hanging on his tongue, but eventually they disappeared along with his previous determination. Perhaps it would be better to keep quiet for now and let the girl go. Other conversations would wait for their time. The decisive step to escape was just a moment away, and Napper would have jumped into the open window with the girl, but Kai Chen stopped him with lightning speed. At this crucial moment, Zeke's hand suddenly slid forward, injuring the girl. "Get close to the kidnapper." Curiosity took my breath away. I was so eager to see how his face would change, but in response, I only got a silent back that disappeared into the distance. Napper disappears without a trace, granting the boys the freedom they longed for from his sorcery. It became obvious. The magic of transport had unfolded before them. Mastering this rare and difficult skill is available only to the chosen ones. An average thief would not be able to do it. Thoughts whirled in my head, trying to grasp the meaning of what I had seen. Meanwhile, the girl indicated with a slight gesture, talked to her again, apologized as soon as he remembered. He had forgotten something important. He asked worriedly if she was okay. Zeke was confused by the girl's words of gratitude, because he couldn't understand how this stranger knew his name. Suddenly, it became clear that the girl Zeke had recently appeared before was his employer. She openly confessed her true identity as the Divine Queen of Beasts, sincerely thanked Zeke for saving her, and once again expressed her gratitude for the life she had saved. The news that Mr. Zeke had been approved for admission was made official. The name Sophia, the Divine Queen of Beasts, sounded from the stranger's lips. Tiffany returned the greeting warmly. Giving his name, the young man apologized for the rudeness he had shown the day before. The Queen, with a smile, advised him not to adopt an overly formal tone in his conversation with her. Tiffany eagerly embraced this idea. After all that had happened, they had almost become friends. I only smiled slightly at Sophie, emphasizing that in reality, their relationship was not as tense as it might seem. Having agreed that they would still have to discuss many important issues, the girl decided to limit herself to the most important. She announced her desire to see Zeke become the chief physician at the royal court. The boy bowed his head without hesitation and humbly agreed with the words of the mistress. The realization of his inevitable destiny, to become the chief physician at court, rolled over him like a wave. The thinker recognized immediately. This person was the head of the medical department. He had only recently had the opportunity to step on the threshold of this institution. Suddenly, an appeal was heard from behind. A voice called for Master Oroa to stop, because His Majesty was preparing for a meeting and was waiting for him. Carefully crossing the threshold, he apologized for his unexpected appearance. Suddenly, a stranger's hand flashed before his eyes. When asked about his identity, Tai said, "This is Master Zoroa, outstanding among all doctors." The simple truth reached Zeke. The head physician was standing before him. A look full of rage slid towards the main character. He asked about his intentions. The chief physician turned his gaze to her and noted with stern certainty. As the court physician, who was now responsible for the palace, he had no right to stand aside. To entrust such an important position to a completely inexperienced foreigner, despite the wishes of the princess herself, was an extremely reckless act. The maid was outraged by such harshness, but the queen remained unmoved and, remaining calm, assured her that there were no problems with her decision. It was hard to believe that words could be devoid of meaning, so they decided to put Zeke's name on the list of candidates for the position of assistant. But Sorrow's doubtful look showed that in the depths of his mind, there was a doubt burning whether this person was in the right place. and whether he would be able to withstand the strain of this difficult mission. It's hard to imagine how this unattractive bald guy managed to rise to such a high position, even with the support of influential patrons. If he's also an exiled spy from a foreign country, his arrest is only a matter of time. The realization of his own superiority suddenly seized him. Words and gestures really humiliated the boy. A keen gaze carefully studied the hero's figure, analyzing every movement, the distribution of strength. Without wasting time, the main character asked to be allowed to examine his right hand. He didn't understand why he needed to expose his palm. Zeke, noticing a barely perceptible tremor in his hand, asked if there was a fresh wound there by chance. Deciding that he was in front of an injured man, he politely asked permission to examine it. However, Zoror categorically rejected this proposal. After all, he held the position of chief physician at the court, and could cope with such a scratch without outside help. His gaze immediately caught a familiar scratch. The same wound that the bandit had used the sharp blade of his scalpel to scold him with last night. Confused and bewildered, the guards could not understand what the Lord meant when he mentioned the mysterious bandits. They did not notice any traces or signs of danger. Everything remained a mystery to them. Only later did the truth emerge. The queen deliberately hid this news from everyone, fearing to inflame chaos and fear among the people. Last night, a bandit appeared in her chambers. A mortal threat hung literally over her head. Fortunately, the resolute Zeke rushed to the rescue. The guards, having listened to this story, froze in shock. They realized that the role of the mysterious criminal that time was none other than the famous Master Zorro. Most immediately dismissed this idea as complete nonsense, arguing that such a scar was not evidence at all, because such a mark could be found on any vagrant. Asking to be allowed to take a small amount of his own blood, he expressed the hope that comparative analysis would help determine whether the sample on the scalpel belonged to him. The astonished guards could not believe that such methods actually existed. Fear gripped him, and the queen did not wish to see the slightest resistance. When the master fled, Zeke quickly immobilized him. Formalities in communicating with attackers are useless. Relief spread through Tiffany's body as she realized that she was once again safe thanks to his intervention. Pride filled the princess's heart as she watched Zeke burst into the castle, instantly exposing the machinations of the intruders and punishing them without hesitation. The young man gently asked her to get off his back and apologize to the queen. However, the girl grumbled in response that it was no longer important now. The best court physicians from all corners of the state gathered at the palace. From behind Zeke, the doctors here take care not only of people's health, their care extends to livestock as well. This discovery stunned Zeke. Before that, he was used to relying only on his own strength. Meanwhile, the girl sincerely noted his achievement, adding that it was Mr. Zeke who had been entrusted with the role of their mentor. She respectfully asked permission to give her name. Introducing himself as Zeke Fettel, the stranger revealed that he knew Ari well, the new head physician of the arts. Life turned upside down in an instant. The sudden appearance of a stranger was not to everyone's liking. But despite the cold looks, an unwavering desire burned in his heart to prove that he was capable of becoming his own person among these people. In case of any difficulties, he asked to inform him immediately, and swore to make every effort to help. With such words, this appeal seemed almost pathetic to Zeke. It was annoying that nothing wiser came to mind. However, there was no time for inventions at that time. And it was at this moment that an unexpected thought pierced him like lightning. The incredibly warm reception came as a real surprise to him. The sincere hospitality of those around him was pleasantly surprising and touching. Stories about his feat had long been circulating among those present. The news of the rescue of the princess and the powerful beast goddess spread through the city instantly, and now every resident is discussing this heroic act. The predecessor turned out to be similar to him. The young man himself suddenly realized he had never been considered evil. The girl gently reassured him, assuring him that he didn't have to worry. Together, the friends promised to make every effort to support him. I was intently contemplating our first steps when suddenly someone rushed into the room with a panicked look and confusedly informed me of the danger that was looming over us all. Shock and confusion gripped everyone as they turned their gazes to where they were pointed. From there, as if from a chasm, a furious flock of demonic monsters poured out, swiftly advancing upon them. An amazing sight. A whole flock of dragons rose into the sky, striking the imagination of those present. It was at this moment that Zeke had an epiphany. He finally realized who he was dealing with. Suddenly Fagans flew up to them, joyfully calling the boy his brother. Surprised, the boy asked what brought them here. Disappearance had left them confused, and neither of them wanted to get to work until they found him. Surprise seized him. Who would have thought that dragons could speak? This unusual ability was revealed along with new opportunities granted by fate. The girl was overcome with fear of mystical creatures, but the kind words of the boy, who was already accustomed to taking care of dragons in his own apartment, quickly restored her peace. Thoughts revolved around the idea of sheltering these majestic flying dragons. The winged creatures freely soaring in the sky seemed to him the perfect companions for his travels. His confidence grew. With them, new horizons would open up, and no journey would ever have limits. The proposal aroused his sincere admiration. Without hesitation, everyone immediately agreed. Once upon a time, there was a powerful state in the lands of Zika. The question about the new crown was asked with a slight tinge of pride. Is it worthy of the greatness of its owner? The minister immediately nodded, assuring that such a luxurious decoration would glorify the ruler even in distant lands. The ruler himself mentally agreed that it was much more practical than spending considerable funds on maintaining a menagerie. He was not left with the certainty. One has only to show this crown to people, and everyone will certainly admire its greatness. It was time to leave, for they had already been waiting too long. The man cautiously asked if the flying dragon was ready to fly, but at that moment the servant, visibly agitated, hurried to tell them something important. The news of the absence of the flying dragon simply stunned Becca. It turned out that since the very morning, everyone in the whole city had rushed to search for them. Fear gripped both of them. Without the flying dragon, there was no chance of getting to the meeting. The journey began differently than expected. When the group was about to saddle the horses and take their seats in the carriage, one of the horses suddenly lunged forward and hit the king directly in the face with its hoof. Need to apologize to the master. The other horses behaved similarly. As soon as Zik left, they immediately forgot about the animals. They didn't give them food, they left them completely to their fate. No horse can withstand work in such conditions. In this condition, harnessing them to a cart was out of the question. Saddling them seemed impossible. Confused, the king had no idea what to do next, but to take the direct route to King Rogel. Under the circumstances, a carriage was the only way to reach the destination. The realization that horses would have to be harnessed caused the king real anger. The image of a servant forced to race alongside the carriage flashed in his imagination. However, the minister promptly intervened, trying to relieve the tension and promising to find a solution to the situation. Thanks to these words, the king gradually began to realize that everything was not as bad as it seemed at first. Other choice. Indifference gripped their hearts, forcing them to abandon everything to fate. A difficult search for a new path lay ahead. The late arrival of the king of Gothmugula did not go unnoticed by the guests. As he entered the hall, he immediately apologized, briefly stating the reason for his delay. He had to overcome a number of unexpected obstacles. The main issues had already been discussed. Would he want to add anything new? He need not worry. He would certainly be mentioned in the closing remarks of the minutes. It would be emphasized that King Rogale had kindly declared his devotion to the cause. The hall responded with a light laugh. Who would have thought that among such an influential council of monarchs, he would consider himself the most important of all? The laughter grew louder, and Rogale had no doubt that Z was behind it. New house that Sophia had found for them had become a cozy haven for Zeke and Kai-chan. There was enough space for everyone to feel comfortable. Kai-chan was filled with joy, because now he lacked nothing. It turned out that the boy had made contact with Mint, which greatly shocked Kai-chan. After a short thought, he composed a letter to her and sent a reply. No matter how strong her hostility was, blood ties still obliged her to know at least something about his current situation. Meanwhile, Zeke decided not to waste time and set about cleaning. A sense of foreboding crept into Mint's soul. A letter from her brother had just arrived, and her heart was pounding with anxiety. Fury burned in his soul. Such a disgrace seemed an irreparable humiliation, a real blow to honor. All the arrows of indignation flew towards the treacherous Zeke. Meanwhile, the minister tried to calm his agitated emotions. The accusations also fell on Gaiman. According to Taylor, it was precisely because of his lack of a worthy proposal that the case failed. That's why they turned to him. The unexpected news was that Mrs. Mint was already waiting for an audience with him. The identity of the mysterious guest remained a mystery to the ruler, until the minister reminded him. It was the same brilliant magician who had been mentioned earlier, Mint Vatel and Archa, recently invited to the royal court. Through Raghail's mind, this was the girl standing before him. The minister had said she was only 15, but she had already brilliantly completed her studies at the Academy of Magic. Such a unique talent only comes along once every 100 years, a true genius among wizards. What made such a prominent figure take the risk and apply for an open competition? The king's confidence suggested that it was all about growing fame. The minister confirmed this idea without hesitation. Now the interest of other states in their country was guaranteed to increase. Flashed through his mind. She must have come to bow before his first day in his new position. This attitude pleased his pride. But instead, the girl said briefly, he would have to figure things out on his own. Having calmly said goodbye, she disappeared behind the door. For a moment, his hand rested on her shoulder, wanting to catch what she was hiding in her words. But the touch brought an unexpected chill that ran through her body, binding her fingers with icy fear. The worry for him was unbearable. Mint immediately warned, "Stay away, don't even dare touch her." Only one person had the privilege of being near her, her brother. Then suddenly Rajwell appeared on the horizon, a mysterious brother whose existence no one had even suspected. Once upon a time, an exile named Ariom, known as a seasoned veteran, took care of the animals in the place of Zihu. The mistress, looking at the stranger, suddenly saw her own sister was standing before her. Her only wish is to work side by side with her brother. When he is not around, the place loses its meaning for her. In the end, all that remains is to wish her good luck. It was a request to stay and wait a bit. Her support was important for the honor of the homeland at that very moment. But for Mint, the words remained a mystery. The girl instantly disappeared into the silence of the night. Coldness and irritation filled her heart towards all her family, but it hit Z the hardest. The anticipation of an imminent meeting with his brother filled his heart with joyful excitement. But a new obstacle unexpectedly arose on the way. She slipped into the crowd, where no one guessed that she was not just an ordinary passerby. On her path, resolutely forced her to stop and sternly asked who she was. Mayant politely asked them to let her pass, but her words remained incomprehensible to those around her. With anxiety in her voice, the girl asked to make way. Meeting her brother was the most important thing for her at that moment. Spell caused real fear in everyone around her. Meep barely managed to rise to the magical impulse, but suddenly the stranger stopped her with a decisive gesture. The long-awaited meeting with her brother, who had not been around for a long time, caused a storm of emotions. She missed him so much. He immediately asked why she was here, and did not forget to ask about her academic progress. With sincerity in her voice, the girl said that graduating from school was a real start for her into the adult world, with the need to look for a job. At the same time, she shared unexpected news. She had recently left the service of a court mage. No way to understand why she had decided to take such a step. So much effort had been put in, so much energy had been expended, to earn this prestigious position. All her desires came down to one thing: to be next to him. No point in hoping that her disposition would remain the same as before. In the past, her attitude had often been distinguished by arrogance. A barely noticeable blush touched her cheeks when Kai Qian admitted that growing up had not been easy. The customs and openness of her soul had remained in childhood. Her frankness suddenly made the girl feel awkward and embarrassed. She thought she was filled with hatred for him until she apologized for her long silence. But as soon as the boy left the country, she realized, by choosing insincerity, she risks remaining a mystery to everyone, one that will be misinterpreted for the rest of her life. To open your soul and admit, from now on and forever, your heart belongs only to your brother. Lips uttered the same declarations of love, and Mint's heart blossomed with joy. Their feelings turned out to be mutual. Then Kai-chan, looking back at Mint, unexpectedly revealed to her that Zeke was secretly in love with her. To this Mint, half-jokingly, added, "If Mrs. Lizard has not heard this news yet, then she can confirm. Zeke is really not indifferent to her." Having heard the arguments, the Prudingenist expressed the idea of returning home, delicately apologizing for the inconvenience. The guard only nodded in response, saying, "No problem. If it's your sister, everything is fine." The guy casually invited the girl to visit him, and she readily agreed. The very idea that she would become a guest in this country, brought unexpected surprise to everyone who heard it. He was filled with joy when Lady Sophia agreed. He was filled with relief that she would no longer have to live under his roof. The realization that a brother and sister were living together did not cause any surprise. There was nothing unusual about it. But Zeke remained confident. From now on, the girl was no longer dependent on others. She had become a truly independent person. Holding back her excitement, she denied his words, tenderly confessing, "I haven't smelled your scent in too long," and revealed her deepest secret. She loves him sincerely and endlessly. With all the clarity of awareness, it came again. Her heart, like a magnet, was still drawn to him. The shimmering glow gradually dissolved into the twilight. It seemed to Zeke that the spell had weakened and was about to disappear without a trace. But the girl only smiled mysteriously. A premonition told her this was only the beginning of the unknown. Assuming that these creatures were not real monsters, Mint identified them as cunning shadow puppets. No physical blows, no attempts to put them to sleep or paralyze them had worked. This quickly led Zeke to the conclusion that only by defeating the sorcerer himself could this mystery be solved. And indeed, his guess turned out to be correct. The confused wizard stared anxiously at his shadow puppet. The one that had not yet been taken by sword or spell suddenly suffered damage. The mister watched with admiration the unexpected development of events. The boy managed to do what seemed impossible, forcing the wizard to search in confusion for an explanation. Without hesitation, he stitched the wound with ordinary thread, as if it were a routine matter. Just a few movements, and the wound disappeared under the rough seam. The magician's unlimited power allowed him to fill the room with legions of shadow puppets, only to tear them to pieces with ruthless precision in an instant. A moment of paralysis made the sorcerer confused. How did this young man know his secret? His telepathic messages remained, it seemed, perfectly disguised. The protagonist subtly teased his opponent. "If you're going to hide an adult, don't forget to hide the heartbeat because it's so easy." The antagonist just snorted, calling the boy a fool. Tying him to a tree, Zeke stubbornly demanded the truth. He wanted to know who it really was. Mint no longer had any doubts. Now a confession was inevitable. Having become her loyal servant, he now had to answer every question honestly, without trying to lie. Zeke's expression took on a terrifying look. She imperiously ordered him to explain the real reason for the attack on her brother. Said, "The king and the prime minister personally gave the order to kill Zeke." What she heard shocked the protagonist to the core. After all, these were the people who had driven him out of the country. Exile was still acceptable. But murder, that was a whole other level. Zeke wondered in despair if his act had really been that cruel. The thought of forgiveness seemed unattainable, so without further ado, I disappeared from her life. Past, the king became more and more eager to get the girl back. However, the minister remembered well, they had done this to Z. It seemed that Gaiman was on his side, but in reality, he just refused to admit it. On the contrary, Gaiman insisted, getting the girl back just like that wouldn't work. You would have to do something. The only thing everyone had to see from the ruler was a demonstrative desire to accept the exiles back. At the same time, almost immediately, as soon as the right moment came, a hired killer would appear in his plans to eliminate the inconvenient guests forever. The minister, reflecting on the situation, considered the king's view too gloomy. However, the monarch himself did not share this. The plan with the mercenaries seemed so reasonable that he could hardly resist giving the order immediately. Finally, Mrs. Mint appeared before them. The minister, feeling alarmed, hastened to report that the murderer had already penetrated their kingdom at the very moment when they were expelling Zeke. The king only confirmed this gloomy confession. Everything fell into place. The girl quickly put the puzzle together. As Mrs. Mint explained, the mercenary they had sent had not been able to cope with the task, despite all the efforts and a carefully planned plan. Refusing without hesitation, the people insisted that it was only a misunderstanding. Anxiety for Mayant and Zeke remained in their hearts. However, Mayant saw clearly. These souls were no longer subject to change. Justice would inevitably overtake everyone who had wronged her and her brother. Pleadings and attempts to bribe her with promises of wealth and generous land grants failed to sway her determination. As a result, the fortress sank into an ice shell, turning into an ice trap. The brothers assured them that they would survive, but another attempt to attack him would be fatal for them. After the king's words, Mr. Ass did not hide his admiration for the wonderful renovations of the castle. But he immediately sincerely admitted, with a slight note of sadness, that everything new no longer pleased him, and his soul was tired of this brilliance. Looking over her shoulder, the girl frantically searched for familiar features in the crowd. The boy's voice suddenly called out to her, breaking her out of her thoughts. Telling them that there was an open bathhouse in front of them, the master added, "This bathhouse was created by himself, during his hours of rest, for spiritual pleasure. Despite the fact that daily chores are no longer overwhelming, fatigue still does not recede." Miyata noted, "The water in this place is a real miracle, like a source of inspiration. No idea about divine energy." Meanwhile, Tiffany was already standing ready to swim, and, without wasting a second, dove headfirst into the water with him. The princess sincerely apologized for distracting the boy, but admitted that there was nothing more interesting for her than spending time with Zeke. As soon as her name was uttered, the girl was struck with recognition. The very person who had saved her brother was standing before her. Rumors about this girl had already reached her ears. It seemed that it was her older sister. The newcomer was captivated by the meeting. A light of joy flashed in her eyes. The boy next to her only stared in amazement at this unexpectedly cozy scene. The keen gaze of Chan and the queen immediately caught them in the crowd. A wave of indignation swept over Kai-chan. She knew all too well his weakness for charms, and especially for the female form. Meanwhile, Sophia, full of determination, stepped forward, desiring to join their restless company. Some of the other guys noticed this too, and were immediately interested. They wanted to join in too. It is not at all clear what all this could mean. Excited that he immediately asked what had really happened. In the cozy bathtub, sincere joy spread. People and monsters carefreely enjoyed moments of unity. Her heart burned with a dream. May the whole earth someday be filled with carefree and shared laughter. Mint, sharing her opinion, knew well. There would be no true happiness as long as the shadow of the demon lord hung over the world. Brother strictly restrains the creatures, but the dark curse from the demon lord still hangs in the air. As long as the demon lord remains among the living, the endless war will not cease for a moment. Without any hesitation, the girl approached the demon lord, and with a smile suggested that they share a bathroom to become closer. Mit's reaction was violent. He could not control himself. The idea seemed so absurd to him. The servants summoned all the magicians who had a hand in the matter, but were in danger of failure in the face of complex and dangerous magic. The minister, impassive and demanding, did not want to hear any excuses. He only firmly ordered, "Finish everything by the end of the week." Surprisingly, no one was hurt this time, although everything around had been significantly damaged. Additional funds would undoubtedly have to be allocated, he decided, muffling his angry reproaches to Zeke. Meanwhile, Heyman noted with relief that his arrival had been a real lifesaver. The estimate for the restoration of the castle and the surrounding lands had already been drawn up. While everyone was discussing the matter, the king became lost in his own thoughts, and gestured for everyone to be quiet. In his eyes it was clear that he wanted to teach Zeke a lesson, since he was already quite fed up with him. Everything out quickly. Only one question, the castle, did not leave him with firm confidence. Rogale intended to solve the matter with his fortress on his own, so he did not need interference. The only thing he wished for today was that they would not disturb him until morning, and instead of useless chatter, they would bring a list of 10 ways to destroy Seaport. Doubts crept into his soul. The servants reported that the owl was frozen, flights were impossible, and all communication with all other stations had disappeared. The salamander guards immediately plunged into a sleeping darkness. Even the mighty sentinel monster could not cope with the fierce cold and became unbearably capricious. It was a slippery slope. Every step was difficult. A crack in the water pipe made the climb even more dangerous. Ayman could not understand how things could have turned out this way. After examining the girl, the doctor assured her that by morning there would be no trace of the cold, and that he would definitely visit her again tomorrow. The mother gently put the child to bed, whispering a wish for peaceful dreams. Meanwhile, the doctor thought about the importance of vaccination and instructed her to prepare the necessary things for the vaccination. The woman sincerely thanked the doctor for his care. With a sincere smile, Tiffany cheerfully announced that all the work had been done for today, and added that they had unexpectedly had a real date for the 3 of them. This statement instantly inflamed Kai-chan, who decided not to back down and confidently announced it was she who was going to meet Sick from the start. The princess, in turn, enthusiastically picked up the idea, anticipating a fun argument. Not wanting to give up, Kai-chan reproached her rival for having too ardent feelings for Sik and suggested that they quickly get rid of her. Sik had to step in as a peacemaker and ask the girls to cool down. Carefree mood still hasn't left him. Light entertainment brings him pleasure, and a rare silence and peace have reigned around him, which is significantly different from the past days. Translator's note: the unfamiliar smell of blood hung in the air, causing Zeke to pause in confusion. Right before my eyes, a giant dragon sprawled, covered in numerous wounds and deep cuts. The dragon was still clinging to life, staring confusedly at the silhouette in front of him. It was unknown who it was, a human, or perhaps an elf's accomplice. The guest said his name, immediately emphasizing that he had no relationship with elves, so he could not be a friend to one of them. Surprise brightened the teacher's face as soon as his voice reached her. Z confirmed his presence, but the words sounded surprisingly unusual. Interested, Kai-chan asked why he was talking like that, and Tiffany explained everything. He was currently communicating with a dragon. The dragon froze in shock. He had never met a person capable of addressing him since his birth. At the same time, Zeke asked to postpone the conversation to another time, justifying it by serious injuries. With interest, is it possible for a person to cure a dragon? The main character assured unequivocally that it is quite possible, because even majestic dragons sometimes need sensitive help, like all living creatures. The dragon nodded and admitted, rest was indeed necessary to regain strength. The surprise only increased. Why did Zeke offer help at all? The explanation was calmly and without hesitation. The medical profession does not allow you to stay away if someone is in danger, even if it is a dragon. The words hung in the air for a moment, and the monster plunged into silent reflection for several seconds. Asking Z for help, the hero, full of hope, entrusted his request. Z was just about to start treating him when strangers suddenly approached him. From somewhere. What brought him here? The diamond dragon has long been considered the main trophy of Master Elkus, him to collect the largest leaves he could find on the trees. The stranger once again made his presence known, expressing his dissatisfaction with being ignored. In response, the young man remarked that if this man was just sitting here doing nothing, he had better not interfere with the treatment and leave immediately. With irritation, he reminded them that it was not permissible to treat an Elkaz dragonfighter like that. A just punishment awaits this enemy. Elkaz takes aim with cold determination, pulling the bowstring to the limit. The dragon, sensing mortal danger, feverishly shouts to Zeke, "Save yourself!" The realization that this master's arrows are capable of piercing even his unshakable diamond armor squeezes the heart with fear. Arrows fly one after another, but each one falls under his watchful eye. Not a single shot escapes his relentless attention. Surprise flashed in his eyes, curiosity took over, and he asked who was standing before him. Zeke calmly replied, declaring that he was a veterinarian and a doctor, and remembered that he had already promised to help with the treatment. But his opponent only interrupted him in irritation, sternly ordering him not to make up any more stories. There would be no veterinarian among them. The hail of arrows was blinding, preventing even a crumb from being seen, when amidst the whistle of death, the dragon abandoned the idea of immediately retreating. Here, everyone found themselves on the verge of life and death. No emotion. His indifference was icy. The only thing the boy noted was his own irritation, which he barely contained. Will he finally find peace and ask for at least a moment of silence? Elkus assured with confidence. He still remembers not only his face, but also his name. He disappeared suddenly, as if dissolving into thin air. The protagonist froze, stunned by the spectacle of magical transmigration, an art that not everyone can master. Do such powerful sorcerers really exist in this world? On his own territory, this guy had no equal. Every opponent was inferior to him. He never wastes time on unnecessary ceremonies with those who decide to interfere, but acts decisively, knowing no regrets. Now, having started the processing, he strictly ordered to stay in place and not to make any unnecessary movements. After asking about the progress of the treatment, Zeke began to carefully analyze what else he could do to help. His thoughts kept running. Helping was more difficult than he had first thought. The external wounds had already been treated, so the next step was natural draconian recovery, which should deal with the rest of the damage. Involved did not have the desired effect. The wound healed incredibly slowly. Apparently, the scoundrel had enchanted his weapon with a special spell. The dragon was surprised to see such an unusual situation. Of all the hunters he had met, none had even thought about treating the dragon. Meanwhile, Morsky was quick to convince him to relax and rely entirely on the doctor's skill. The dragon finally realized that the doctor was hoping to cure him using only his own human abilities, which were clearly not enough. Was this creature really ready to offer an alternative, or was he simply testing his resolve? Zeke answered these doubts honestly. It was his custom not to hide either the truth or his own limitations. Recovering, he apologized briefly, because right now it was all he could do to support himself. The dragon indicates the need for sacred energy. Its power, in his opinion, will be enough to strengthen the spell. For the first time, Zeke felt a powerful surge of sacred energy. The dragon calmly explained the exceptional power of this magic and asked if the boy was capable of using his healing skills. But while it all seemed simple in theory, the veterinarian understood that in practice it was not as simple as it seemed at first glance. Chan wondered if he already had this kind of magic. Guy explained that his abilities only supported people, giving them the strength to heal themselves. True healing, however, was a magic of a completely different level, one that defied fate itself and could restore everything to its original state. He also added that he had not yet mastered the knowledge that Mint had sought to teach him. Deep inside him, an invincible energy gurgles. There is no room for chance here. All this is the result of the long paths of healing he has gone through. Involuntarily wondering where he got so much knowledge from, I now finally understood. It's all down to his extraordinary spirit and skillful hands. Close monitoring of savings helps keep the situation under full control. Improving conditions immediately revitalizes the market, filling it with new opportunities and energy. The ideal yet. But Zeke had managed to perform a true miracle, to heal his wounds. Tiffany immediately noticed. The title Dragon Doctor now belonged to him, and with it, the unique skill God's Hand and a new level, Doctor of 100 Beasts. Joy for her friend revived in her soul, even though sometimes her behavior seemed a little creepy. Joy filled his heart upon learning that nothing had happened to the dragon. The creature once again expressed its sincere gratitude for the rescue, and noted that it was thanks to his strength that it was able to avoid disaster. Barely managed to admit that he had done as his heart commanded, when he suddenly fainted without finishing a single word. Waking up in his own bed, the realization of his sudden loss of consciousness jolted his thoughts. The subsequent events were erased from memory, leaving only a fragmentary recollection. The mad elf rushed in an unknown direction, and he himself took up the rescue of the diamond dragon. Unexpectedly, his gaze fell on the girl, who lay motionless right next to him. Having recovered, the girl was sincerely happy to see that the guy was safe. She admitted that her heart froze with fear when Zeke suddenly lost consciousness. After that, the question arose. Who is she really? Walking into the room, the sister immediately realized her brother had already come to his senses. What opened up to her gaze struck her to the core, leaving an unpleasant residue in her soul. Suddenly it became clear that the threat to this country concerns not only the mysterious Tiffany. An instant thought flashed through her head. We'll have to hide them under a thick layer of ice. Meanwhile, Zeke is convinced that her sister has drawn the wrong conclusions. After all, he had not even been introduced to that unsurpassed girl. But now his own thoughts, incomprehensibly, began to feel the influence of her ardent determination and, before him, there was no doubt about it. Her gurgling laughter sounded so close, and the light joke about how he had almost forgotten her face only strengthened the familiar warmth of the meeting. The mirror that Sophia held up revealed to Kai-chan her own reflection, so altered that the girl barely recognized herself. It was at this moment that Queen Sophia gracefully entered the room, determined to dot all the I's and explain what was happening. The power of Zeke's evolution gave Chan the ability to take on a human form. For Mint, this discovery was a complete mystery that was difficult to comprehend. The main character's memory flashed back to the words of T, who had once hinted at a similar phenomenon. Were all the inhabitants of this place familiar with the phenomenon of monster evolution? Mint understood well. This process consists in the fact that a creature becomes stronger, increasing its level, if it hunts those more powerful than itself. However, Zeke noticed an interesting detail. Kai-chan had never eaten other monsters, and she confirmed this. The queen explained in detail. Monsters, like them, gain energy through food, but in fact they absorb the magical power of their victims. If you gain enough of this energy, then natural evolution is quite possible. It turned out that the source of evolution was precisely the magical power of his brother. This fact was finally confirmed, and Zeke immediately understood. It was this extraordinary power that the dragon had in mind. Queen Sophia explained that this was possible thanks to the contract she had concluded with Tiffany. Having made a deal with the divine beast, the hero rose to a new level. He received the gift of the boundless energy of the gods. Yesterday's meeting with the dragon seems to have further fueled this supernatural power. The realization came suddenly. The source of this power was Fettel and Ari. Intrigued, the queen began to ask about this amazing phenomenon. The girl said that the representatives of the Fettel and Ari clan could draw strength from the energy of monsters, with which they established a special connection, as if using it as their own. Her brother, having received divine energy and the power of the dragon, experienced a radical rebirth of his essence. Queen Sophia was convinced that she had also changed under the influence of this incredible power. It seemed absolutely logical to her. Meanwhile, Zeke and Kai-chan remained in complete misunderstanding of what it was all about. The supreme healer, who had mastered a skill similar to the power of the gods, amazed even Zeke with his abilities. His art of healing left the most demanding speechless. No one could even come close to matching such amazing skill. Magic is an incomprehensible force that has the power to cure the most complex ailments. This man is equally adept at bringing people, animals, and even magical creatures back to life. If such a gift became his possession during his journey, confidence has settled firmly in his heart. Everything that has happened is destined to happen exactly as it was. Instead of doubt, determination appears. Now this power finally belongs to him, and he chooses to use it according to his desire. The reason for Kai-chan's sincere laughter remained a mystery to him. In fact, the source of joy lay elsewhere. Zeke's power had affected her, changing her very essence, and now her body had become perfect for him. It was this transformation that gave her true happiness. He assumed that although her appearance had changed to a human one, her mind remained that of a lizard. She did not look graceful on such an awkward body. Simplicity and modesty are the images that really suit her. It is in her current form that she looks harmonious. Despite her doubts about the body created for her, Kai-chan was truly irritated. Wanting to prove herself right, she resolutely challenged him to a duel, boldly declaring her readiness to fight. However, at the same time, she tried to smooth out the sharp corners, calling for peace and harmony. For the queen, these amusements seemed to be a source of genuine joy, but Zeke quickly drew attention to T's somewhat unusual behavior. He was left wondering if he always behaved so incomprehensibly. From her words it became clear that she was not a mere mortal, but a real oracle. Divine beasts are in close spiritual connection with the heavens, and it is her connection that is distinguished by its special power. It seems that the will of the gods themselves is heard through her. Gaius came to the conclusion that all her stories about the gods are not allegories at all, but pure truth. It turns out that God really exists in heaven. With new knowledge, the truth suddenly revealed itself, but you are still allowed to remain in the usual rhythm of life. That's exactly how it all works out. Choosing his own path is his business, and she will stay by his side, supporting him with joy. Such words especially excited the young man, making his heart worry even more. With sincere gratitude, Sophia noted his respectful attitude, but firmly emphasized that now he was not facing a queen, but only a simple Sophia. She expressed the hope that he would allow her to stay by his side, to follow his travels, because otherwise her presence would seem to her only a burden. The words stuck in his throat. No answer came to mind. Meanwhile, Tiffany appeared in the doorway. Her face lit up with genuine joy when she noticed that he had come too. Her gaze slid to his side and stopped at his mother, who seemed to be equally concerned for him. Memories of the pitiful man inflamed Elkis with rage. The ruler had demanded that his army prepare for an immediate offensive. The enemy lands must fall now, without delay. One of the soldiers timidly tried to object. Even their lord was certain that the beastmen were not to blame. The very boldness in the subordinate's voice only added fuel to the fire of Elkis's anger. Still reeling from the loss of his family, he could not fathom how they dared to humiliate him so mercilessly. The final act of this story will unfold in Iravakvabla, where his offenders will face irreversible death at his hands. The intention to wipe their country off the face of the earth burned in his eyes. Leaning on his spear, the guard asked the elven visitors what had brought them to the gates of his village. He suggested that perhaps the travelers had come precisely to admire the breathtaking views of the surroundings. The headman broke into a smug smile, hurling a disparaging, "A bunch of losers." With his ruthless nature, it wasn't hard to imagine how this man could turn an entire country into ruin in a matter of hours. The realization of what had just happened never dawned on him. Elkisa was genuinely surprised how he had managed to get out of there unscathed and unharmed. The opponents intended to launch an offensive again. The failure to strike the enemy proved fatal for him. His enemies instantly tore him to pieces. Even his worst premonitions did not allow for such an outcome. However, as soon as they tried to move on, a wall of light blocked their path. The village was drowned in a blinding glow, and further travel became impossible. It became obvious. All the miracles happened because of the spells left behind by the worthless Zeke. Anticipating his imminent return, the residents took care of the powerful defense of the village. Reasonable, right? The guard at the gate confirmed. The day before, Master Zeke had visited the villagers with a new check. It turned out that everyone whom Zeke had managed to heal had been under a mysterious, almost festive glow for some time. Realizing that they could not overcome such a defense, the detachment considered retreating. However, Elkis stubbornly stood his ground. The famous dragon fighter did not know what defeat was. Unexpectedly for everyone, he summoned a demonic bath onto the battlefield, dreaming of turning the tide of the battle. Nothing will stop their onslaught. In desperation, Elkis summons an SS-class demon beast, hoping to crush the obstacle and everything in its path. However, what happens next is a complete surprise to him. It's worth thinking about. The auto-revival spell and interception magic belong to the same category of power. This freak is much more powerful than it seemed at first glance. Thinking of retreating and considering another strategy, he unexpectedly encountered a diamond dragon that, shining in the rays, greeted him. The lizard turned out to be the same opponent that had not been defeated completely last time. The dragon's gaze immediately flashed with determination. He was eager for revenge. Feeling Zeke's power, the beast realized that his intentions had long been revealed. It was good that he had managed to survive last time. However, the opponent did not abandon his suspicions. Perhaps the dragon owed that traitor some favor. Without delay, both understood. The time had come for a new duel. The certainty of victory suggested that the opponent was about to be crushed into tiny fragments. The intention to get the magic bow was cut short by a sudden insight. No hand to pull the string. The realization of his loss of strength tightened Magan's chest. The bow no longer obeyed his hands. Anxiety cut through his thoughts. How could he overcome the dragon's thick, steel-like skin now? In addition to the art of shooting, he could also boast of talents in healing magic. Such wounds usually easily succumbed to his spells, but today all efforts were in vain. The dragon explained the reason. True healing is possible only through divine power. Deprivation of Elkis of the blessing was inevitable, as punishment for attacking Zeke, the messenger of the god himself. The confused enemy could not understand what was being said and demanded an answer without hints. The truth he heard struck him to the core. Powerful dragons of unearthly grandeur emerged around Elkis. The diamond scale wing, sighing, said, in simple words, Elkis dared to offend the gods themselves. His pleas for mercy went unanswered. There was no way he could be saved. Excursion turned into a tragedy. Several of them were consumed by a mysterious force. The disturbing news forced Zeke to immediately order increased patrols of the territories. Tiffany exploded with indignation. It seemed unfair to her that Zeke was forcing himself to work again, although he desperately needed rest. Calmly examining the ballots, Zeke replied curtly that he was just looking through them. Tiffany was convinced that even such a trifle deserved to be called work. Without hesitation, she took all the documents from him and strongly advised him to rest. Even the meager salary had to be left behind when the secretary completely destroyed his desire to go in for sports. But to tell the truth, boredom had been annoying him from the very beginning. Kai-chan would never have believed that such words would come from Zeke's mouth. But it was good that there was someone nearby who could show him the right path. The guy mentally admitted he would also like such a wife for himself. Meanwhile, Kai-chan immersed herself in a book, exactly about how to support a man in his search for his calling. It was at this moment that Tiffany suddenly remembered something. The other day, a mysterious cave opened up on the very edge of the border, and it was there that she called for us to go together to uncover its secrets. The endless tunnels stretching into the dark depths of the underworld are known by a single name: the Great Labyrinth. The source of the magical substance that permeates the air is the heart of all magical energy. Hidden in the depths of the earth, it pulses with power, which gradually takes shape into a core. This is how the dungeon is born. This underground world resembles a living being, without consciousness, but with an insatiable thirst to devour people. Monsters, deadly traps, and evil magic erupt from its depths. If these forces are not restrained, sooner or later they will break out beyond the dungeon, posing a threat to the entire outside world. The origin of these creatures is shrouded in a thick veil of mystery. But now, desperate souls from different corners of the world are heading to the dark abysses of the dungeon to once and for all defeat the evil that lurks in its depths. Faced with an underground threat, one of the groups without hesitation rushed into battle with the monsters lurking in the darkness. After asking about the situation, he learned that the situation was under control. Only the uncle who rushed to protect the girl was still causing problems. Without hesitation, the boy explained that it was his duty to stand as a wall to protect others. The girl, however, did not share such self-sacrifice and was convinced that these sacrifices were excessive. The embarrassed team members apologized to the leader for not being able to disarm the trap. Her calm gaze said, "The blame lies not only with one of them." She shared the disgust that the atmosphere of the dungeon caused her. Darkness and tension hung in the air. But despite this, the girl assured, an even worse test awaits them ahead. One of the comrades suggested that perhaps it was time to retreat, because the cave was literally teeming with dangerous S-class monsters. However, the leader calmly refused, not even allowing the thought of retreating. Disregarding the royal order would have serious consequences for her. The team risked losing the Prime Minister's trust, which threatened the complete failure of the mission. Gathering her willpower, the girl ordered a change of position. Now she would take the main blow, and he would be instructed to ensure a retreat. Looking closely at her partner, she warned him to be on the alert. A magical force could already be felt in the air. The monsters became more and more numerous, and the boys realized that they would have to start the journey from the beginning. Despite this, the leader decided not to stop and continue moving forward. Ignoring the danger, Zeke, Princess, and Chang walked down the narrow staircase made of bones, plunging deeper and deeper into the darkness of the dungeon. The atmosphere around was tense. Even Zeke felt excitement rising to his throat. The princess was fascinated by everything around her. For her, this place had turned into a fairy tale amusement park, where every step brought new impressions. She confidently believed they were already at the final level of this video. In front of them was an undoubted center of entertainment. However, Kai-chan did not share the general enthusiasm. She looked uneasily at the rope, suspecting its unreliability. Without hesitation, the answer came. Even if you fall into a lava or get hit, nothing bad will happen. This caused Zeke sincere surprise. The local system seemed too strange. The princess drew attention to the presence of monsters in this reality, but for Zeke this fact did not matter. He did not feel fear of monsters as in ordinary life, considering it absolutely pointless. Eyes were burning, and her hand tightly gripped her weapon, as if the shadow of death hung between them. Such determination for a moment gripped Kai-chen with a cold fear. However, Zeke only smiled indulgently. For him, it all seemed like an ordinary game, an exciting attraction without any danger. The princess herself laughed merrily, slyly noting that it was he who had frightened her. Keen gaze caught traces of injuries on the monster. A thought flashed through his mind. Perhaps it was just skillful makeup or some other cunning trick. However, professional medical experience did not allow him to ignore the alarming symptoms. With a willingness to help, the hero cautiously suggested it would be worth at least examining the wounds, and if necessary, providing the necessary medical assistance. If, of course, they would allow it. Taking a close look at the creature, the wizard wove a healing spell into every cell of its body, granting relief from all ailments. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced his back, from which he could hardly restrain himself. The princess's gaze shone with sincere delight. until the monster realized for the first time his name was Zeke. Gratitude overwhelmed Thor as she brought him out of oblivion. Now he could not do without support, because in the dungeon the shadows of captivity covered not only him, the curse bound many. For Zeke, the realization of the scale of the disaster was a real shock. He did not even imagine how threatening everything was. He gave shelter to a leader and a young lady from that area. With assurances as strong as steel, the young man promised nothing would harm her as long as he was near. The girl tried hard to convince herself that she was holding up well, but her breathing was already catching up, and the dark red blood was mixing more and more generously with the dust. The leader suddenly remembered the sign on the opposite wall. It was the one that showed the way to the very heart of the dungeon. Without hesitation, the wounded girl caught the idea. It was time to move forward. The leader asked how much magical energy was left for the assault. The answer was, Saba had about 20% of her strength left, or up to 30 if she used the rest of the recovery potion. Her order was clear. As soon as the knack was given, she should unleash all her might on the enemy front line. But she also emphasized that if she tried to attack head-on, the enemy would immediately begin to maneuver and dodge. The instructions were brief and unhesitating, to quickly eliminate the enemies while she held back the enemy and bought them precious time. Her advice was to move in the opposite direction to confuse the pursuers, while she herself would direct all her forces to a decisive breakthrough to the very center. Together, they planned to destroy the core. However, one of the team members did not hide his surprise. Did she really take this desperate step for a real plan? But what can we say about a happy ending for everyone? It all seems like a complete fiction. Thoughts of guilt oppressed her. One wrong assessment of the dungeon, and the group found themselves in a real trap. A sense of responsibility squeezed her chest. Suddenly, another member of the squad reproachfully reminded her. Once again, the plan to blow up the wall remained poorly thought out to the end. With such tactics, the dungeon is unlikely to become a serious obstacle. Everything is moving along surprisingly easily. However, did she think about the quality of the gunpowder, whether these thick walls were someone's careful design, and what their real frame consisted of? Did she take into account the force of the explosion, taking into account all the peculiarities of the surrounding space? But she knows nothing even about the properties of the core itself. All this seemed to irritate the leader because her every miscalculation did not escape his watchful eye, unwavering confidence that the team would succeed in this mission. The young men's hearts were filled with hope that each of them would return home unharmed. The leader was filled with deep gratitude to his comrades. Despite previous talk of a possible detonation, this time the threat was averted. No explosion occurred. The huge crowd stunned him. The adventurer seemed to have completely forgotten the familiar face. The stranger discreetly introduced himself as an ordinary doctor who had accidentally found himself in the middle of these events. The fateful trials seemed to have already left their mark on him. The Minotaur hastened to assure him that everything is under control. The curse has indeed made itself felt, but the consequences of old actions have also been added. Zeke agreed, saying that the situation looks much better, as one would expect. Very little time has passed, and the new power is striking in its scale. He has impressive skills. He helps his comrades, easily engages in battles with monsters, and skillfully restores the vitality of his allies. They expressed sincere gratitude to Tim, and recognized that he was worthy of becoming their mentor. Due to hesitation and embarrassment, the request remained unspoken. No one suspected that the real reason was hidden under the mask of awkwardness. Everyone already perceived him as a demon lord. After meeting with Elizabeth and completing all the proper formalities, they were finally recognized as official residents of Nero. Surprise gripped both of them when it suddenly became clear that their hometowns coincided. Elizabeth's surprise was impossible not to notice. The realization came suddenly. Here he was, the legendary veteran Ari, about whom she had heard enthusiastic stories so many times. Confession became a living legend. Rumors spread that he had been missing for a long time, and the state still felt the bitter aftertaste of such a loss for a long time. The answer was that the events of those times were long gone. It turned out that these people were part of a unit personally led by the Prime Minister, and on the instructions of the king himself, they ended up in this very dungeon. Sick thought that this unit also had to go through fire and water. The girl supported his opinion, saying that she had had enough adventures for today. Among all the elite formations of the country, a special place was occupied by the S-Class squad. the legendary Twilight Dragon. In fact, this team was nothing more than the personal army of the Prime Minister himself. This time, they were thrown into a merciless dungeon, without even being given time to prepare. Zeke's thoughts glided around hell itself. In fact, the ordeal turned out to be unbearable. But thanks to the blessing of the gods, they were able to get out of there without a single scratch. Events only reinforced the idea. That place was not called hell for nothing. But, despite all the horrors, the newcomers did not hide their relief and even joy at being saved. Feeling guilty for their recent rudeness, Zeke did not hesitate. The words of apology sounded sincere. Flashed through his mind that this might be their date. However, the boy dispelled the illusion without hesitation. He had only come for a moment to see each other, and he would soon have to return to the infirmary. At that moment, a monster waiter approached them, politely apologizing for the delay. Joy filled his soul, because everything was going as well as possible. The monster was sure. It was thanks to his efforts that such harmony reigned. Elizabeth nodded approvingly. One should pay tribute to Kav, who lifted the curse from the inhabitants of the dungeon. Acutely feeling the support, the monster took everyone into his service. Enormous generosity reigned in the kingdom, and such a manifestation of kindness was truly impressive. All this was possible thanks to Lady Sophia, to whom they sincerely thanked. Embarrassment gripped Bat as she remembered her own words spoken in the dungeon. The monster reassured her. This happens to everyone, and there is no reason to worry. Juice expressed his conviction. Even yesterday's enemies can become today's friends. The past does not determine the future. Only what is happening now is important. Elizabeth readily supported this opinion, among the beastmen and even the fierce monsters. All this was made possible by his efforts. Amazing. It was this special atmosphere that attracted them and inspired them to change their place of residence. The reason, he reasoned, was probably to be found in the exquisite flavors of the local cuisine, and the girl immediately confirmed this, enthusiastically praising the gastronomic masterpieces of this place. Suddenly, a call from her friends came from the crowd. Elizabeth smiled, politely apologized, and, referring to the upcoming festive feast, hurried to join her friends. Gaze stopped at the barely noticeable scar on her cheek, and a determination flashed through his soul. Next time he would definitely change everything. In response, she gave a calm smile, assuring him that it was nothing to worry about. This trace of life had been with her for a long time. All new acquaintances left an indelible mark on her soul, like a reward for what she had experienced. It was a surprise to Zeke that this scar did not require treatment at all. Intrigued, he asked about the memories hidden behind this trace of the past. The question sounded too frank. It should have caused confusion, but instead of real embarrassment, Elizabeth famously joked. After his hesitant apologies, it turned out that she had only skillfully played a trick on her interlocutor. In an effort to get to know the interlocutor better, the girl promised to reveal all her secrets in person. This inspires Zeke to fight harder for her trust. Meanwhile, Kai-chan, who had been secretly listening to every word, immediately noticed. Zeke, in his delight, had again uttered something to V. Name became known to the dragon. The dragon nodded in confirmation, considering what benefit this man could bring him. The king, deciding not to waste time, set out to personally visit the stranger. When the diamond dragon advised to warn the others in advance, his blessings were ignored. The dragon desperately begged the ruler to stop. The patience of the bladder suggested it was worth lingering for a moment longer. It seemed incredible that the legendary Twilight Dragon had left his native lands. The details remained a mystery to her. There were only rumors. They said they left due to their own circumstances. Fury flared in his eyes as he realized they had been sent on a very important mission, and they had left everything behind with a light gait. His colleagues rushed to calm him down, and the minister asked suspiciously what this meant. The bartender just shrugged his shoulders in confusion, making it clear that he had no idea. After all, these people served the Prime Minister himself. He probably knew more than anyone else. Confusion gripped the minister. Despite the fact that only a few resignation letters were on the table, the true motive for all the events remained in the shadows. Of course, the ruler was not going to allow his name to be disgraced by the escape of his subordinates. Without delay, he ordered an urgent selection of a new person to replace those who had left their posts. After much thought, it became obvious. The monarch was completely disconnected from real life, having no idea what was happening in the state. Borders. They barely have time to respond to numerous requests. Some ask to tame angry magical creatures that have escaped, others to return lost pets. Such unfortunate incidents are becoming almost commonplace. People are convinced that the government should take care of peace and security, so they eagerly await what solutions the authorities will offer. At that moment that both were worthy of the award. The king was completely shocked to hear that Zeke was also involved in this story. The bartender, without wasting a second, rushed to ask him to stop. The noise in the room was gaining momentum, so it was decided to take the argument outside. The impudent act of the stranger, who unceremoniously hit Rogale on the leg, drove the ruler crazy. Rage boiled in his veins. Meanwhile, the bartender watched with amazement as the first snowflakes began to swirl outside the window, a phenomenon that was extremely rare here at this time of year. Before those present had time to realize what was happening, disaster had already befallen them. The king had no suspicion in his heart that the real evil was only approaching. And now, when a giant dragon emerged from the darkness, terror seized the monarch, and a cry escaped his lips. Confusion enveloped me, as it remained unclear how the dragon ended up right in the middle of the city, and what role the guards played in this madness. It seemed that there must be a veterinarian in this human settlement. However, the search turned out to be much more difficult than initially thought. The cold-winged dragon sets out in search of a local master, Zeke, known for his extraordinary skills. Dirtender came to the conclusion that the dragon posed a threat to his life. At this time, the ice dragon noticed that none of the people were accepting his words. Confusion seized his thoughts. What to do now, when there was such misunderstanding around? No one understood why the uninvited guests were just standing there, and they immediately passed a verdict, to destroy them. However, the bartender was not at a loss, and advised to refrain. These creatures had not caused any harm so far, so why incite a fight in vain? The minister only sighed in response, and sadly added that the time for change had already been irretrievably lost. In addition, he was worried. Who would take on the responsibility of compensating the city for the damage if the buildings we know turn into ruins? The indignation among the people was growing, because he was considered the culprit of the merciless taxes. Only now did the king realize, all these people were of no use. 420 brave warriors gathered at the call. At the head of the group stood Lamab, the unwavering leader of a ruthless pack of mercenaries, true wolves among men. Among his subordinates were gathered the most desperate choppers and tested fighters, who had already defeated even the formidable ancient dragons. The word leader sounded almost like a mockery on their lips, but such remarks did not affect him. The minister asked with a hint of surprise where the king had gotten such unusual people. The answer was simple. He had hired them personally, because Hyman had turned out to be completely unsuitable. The minister understood everything in an instant. To allow these desperados to remain within the walls of the castle would mean saying goodbye to peace. As for the reward, the king only shrugged his shoulders casually. It was not his concern, they said. It was only a duty that had to be fulfilled. Later he turned to the high-ranking guest, who had arrived at the most opportune moment, and asked to deal with the terrifying monster as soon as possible. Stern order forced him to his knees. The king searched for meaning in these words in confusion, not understanding what was being demanded of him. Peter warned Neil that even in requests, it was important to maintain etiquette. In contrast, Rogale dismissed such conventions as unnecessary fiction. There was no need for a king to kneel before anyone. As they were about to leave, they were suddenly stopped. The leader couldn't help but ask, "What does the king want from his pack if he can't even bow in respect? Admit your own weakness and sincerely ask for support." It's not for nothing that Lama Blatt is considered a true masterpiece. This incredible animal has long become an integral part of my life. It was on his initiative that the boys set off on an adventure to hunt monsters. Conversation caught his attention. It seemed they understood what was being discussed. The leader approached abruptly and struck with unexpected force, asking, "Do these two intend to engage in battle?" After all, he was convinced that he could handle this opponent on his own. Fury raged like a storm. The robbers without hesitation put into action their entire arsenal, ready to burn the remnants of their own strength for the sake of the desired reward. Powerful attacks rained down on the huge monster in a hail, and it seemed that a little more, and victory was already theirs. The king, after this spectacle, began to believe triumph was almost in his hands. Together with Shara, he rushed forward, but on his way he suddenly encountered an invisible obstacle. The source of his strength turned out to be Zeke. The dragon knew about the existence of this mysterious fighter only from Diamond's words, so now he saw his power with his own eyes. Instead of the usual questions, the interlocutor tries to find out who is in front of him, an animal defender or just a person asking not to interfere. However, the answer sounds different. Neither side has gained his support, because conscience did not allow him to pass by the wounded person indifferently. The leader perceives this as humanity, kindness of heart. But Zeke's next act turns the idea upside down. He squeezes and breaks a sphere made of incredibly strong chalcone with his bare hands, glanced at the ice dragon, which was barely holding on. Its strength was almost exhausted. Time was running out. Not allowing doubts to stop him, he immediately casts a paralysis spell on his opponents. His new abilities are impressive. They far surpass the traditional healing arts. The joy of unexpected success awakens a thirst for new achievements. Confidence enveloped the minister, as the achievement seemed to be the result of his own efforts. For Rogale, it was a surprise to discover such powerful potential within himself. A moment before departure, the girl informed her brother of her readiness. The protagonist decided to set off with the ice dragon, choosing a teleport as the way to travel. But suddenly the young magical maiden turned to the dragon with a request to transport her to the kingdom of beastmen, promising that this would be their next stop. The dragon's eyes lit up with joy at such a promise. The king, full of pride, exclaimed at the protagonist, saying that the young man had performed an outstanding deed, supporting the country in the most difficult moment. The monarch emphasized that the glory of the past would be left behind, and, not hiding his gratitude, hinted at the possibility of returning the hero to his honorable position. It seemed that a few more important words remained on the king's lips. I ignored it. Oh, this damn dragon love. Quickly realizing that the egg was stuck inside, the fragile creature was in mortal danger. He asked why she had decided to appear in such a dire condition, since she might not have waited for his help. There was silence. Some suggested that perhaps it was her concern for him that had made her risk everything. With a determined look, Zeke identified the stranger as the Lord of the Ice Dragons. Meanwhile, Tiffany bowed in honor of the stranger and called him the Divine King, since Mint had met the Divine Beast Princess. But as soon as she saw Dragon King Elrond, the past flashed back into her memory. Without hesitation, she named him, the supreme god of all dragons, the legendary Winged Elrond. The Divine Lord was pleased that even a human girl remembered his name, but Zeke wondered what had prompted such a glorious ruler to appear here. From the king's words it became known that the ice dragon was his seventh wife. Recently, strange features had appeared in her behavior, but the ruler had no idea that she was carrying a child under her heart. When he asked why his wife had hidden the good news, she remained silent. Mint suggested that the silence was due to fear of the future struggle for the throne, and the king was struck by the accuracy of this thought. The secondess said, if her baby was born earlier than the queen's, it would certainly turn into a loud scandal. Therefore she decided to hide with the baby as soon as it was born. Elrond received this news with a special feeling. The future child should become a priority for him. However, unlike most monarchs, he does not have a rigid attitude towards the issue of succession. The joy of future fatherhood still filled his heart. By leaving him even for a short moment, the girl condemned herself to an unusual punishment, because the burning fire of his feelings for her only flared up even stronger. Together with the baby, who would soon be born, she sincerely expressed gratitude for this passionate love, apologizing for intruding on their exciting meeting. The guests insisted that the circumstances were too serious to delay. The king's gaze was filled with anxiety. Would he be able to save her? The young doctor confidently assured, salvation was possible. But natural childbirth was no longer an option. The only chance was a surgical dissection. It instantly became clear to Elrond. For the operation, the doctors would have to touch the dragon's very body. The answer was confirmation. Yes, if it would save both of them, he would do whatever was necessary. Doubts and fear held the king back. Confusion did not allow him to immediately give his consent. An easy confidence was evident in every movement. A determined look spoke louder than any words. The king cautiously asked to be allowed to keep his two most loyal dragons with him. In response, Zeke, without a shadow of emotion, remarked that he saw no need to repeat himself. Everything was clear to him anyway. In the end, X was brought back by the hero's efforts. Joy filled his heart, looking at the happy boy. Meanwhile, the king could not find peace, worrying about the safety of the baby. But Zeke confidently assured everyone nothing had happened to him. New feelings were raging in the boy's chest, as if life had spread its wings before him. Suddenly, cracks sounded in the air. A new life was about to appear. Full of faith, Elrond assured everyone not to lose hope, promising to return without fail. Even the expectant mother addressed him. Mint, remaining calm, reassured everyone, noting that little dragons are in no hurry to become attached to someone from the first minutes. After these words, he walked towards the newborn, indignation as she opened her eyes for the first time in this world. Tai could barely contain his own irritation. Each of them was asked to step aside, not to interfere. At this very moment, Mint discovered the secret of the appearance of newborns. Having thanked the young man for the brilliantly completed task, those present felt sincere respect for his skill. Zeke only modestly accepted the praise, considering what had been done a usual thing. But Elrond could not help but remark, excessive modesty is inappropriate here, because it belittles the greatness of his own talent. To open the womb of a mighty dragon is a task exclusively for the chosen ones. For such success, one must possess perfect knowledge, extraordinary magical power, subtle medical skill, and understand the peculiarities of many types of Kai. And only Zeke can cope with this test. The king is truly glad that he has such an invaluable ally by his side. Came, the little one asked what was happening to his wife and child. Elra, without showing any regret, calmly assured him that she would stay with them for a while. But it unexpectedly turned out that he still had one person to thank. And that surprised me quite a bit. Ask for a detailed report of the damage caused. The news of several accidents and crop losses, probably caused by the cold from the dragons, made the Lord worried. However, Zeke's quick actions allowed him to keep the situation under control and prevent serious consequences. However, the king was not left with the thought, do Zeke and his entourage really deserve all this praise? To imagine that Zeke would choose such a dwelling was beyond their expectations. Suddenly, the Dragon King himself appears before them. Indignation flared up in an instant. These were the monarch's private chambers. How had this person crossed the forbidden threshold? It seemed that a shadow of recognition flashed through the minister, as if the face of this guest had already appeared before him somewhere before. However, the uninvited visitor maintained complete composure and declared without a shadow of fear. Thanks to a bizarre coincidence of events, he too wears the crown. His name is Elrond, the Dragon God King, Lord of all the dragon race, over whose colossal wings the heavens flutter. Elrond spoke, revealing the true reason for his appearance. The mystery of these lands is connected with the ice dragon, his beloved, who once lived here. She had done no harm to anyone, but had been the victim of a brutal attack. Now Elrond was desperately searching for the culprit, so he asked if those present had heard of him. Both were taken aback by the surprise and could not immediately answer. He assured that he had witnessed the events. The cause of the attack was a pack of hungry wolves. That was the name of the gang that attacked the dragon. His story was confirmed by the king himself. Confession came without hesitation. He explained his actions as a direct order from the king himself, and at the end, with deep regret, he apologized for what he had done. He had nothing to do with the attack. The minister was filled with anger, but Elrond was seized by a brief thought. That was enough. Retribution was at hand. All crimes against his people would not go unpunished. The castle lies in ruins. This time, the Dragon King is ready to accept the event as an unpleasant accident and leave the guilty alone. However, he will not forgive the next attempt. The full fury of the dragon race will fall on those who dare to repeat such a thing. His warning is stern, remember this. Among the participants this time was Makan, a famous hero who had missed the most vivid events last time. His arrival greatly pleased the king, who felt genuine pleasure from such an unexpected meeting. Walking towards Zeke's house, the girl radiated genuine joy upon seeing him on the doorstep. Zeke asked with slight irony if she had been naughty today. The answer was unquestionable confidence. Obedience was her middle name. However, a sly note appeared in her voice, hinting at something more. Zeke, rising to his feet and casting a worried look at them, quietly asked about the reason for their concern. The girl smiled with slight irony, saying that everything was under control, except for the little things that bothered her. Some incomprehensible things were constantly settling in Zeke's house. Finally, Zeke realized that it was useless to resist. When Elron and the Ice Dragon made such a request, it was simply impossible to refuse. In the end, he agreed to help. Meanwhile, the girl was irritated. There was no need for her to bother with other people's requests just because of someone's words. The whole day passed in Zeke's company. A new student named Shay joined the class, a name Zeke gave her. Zeke explained his choice. He gave the name Shia because of the unearthly blue of her scales. At first he was alarmed that she did not like the chosen name, but to his relief, the girl sincerely thanked him. However, Kaitsian noted something completely different. The main problem was not the name. She wondered, for what reason did Zeke have the right to name someone else's child? In the world of dragons, family ties are above all else, he explained. In gratitude to his brother, the Dragon King entrusted him with the highest honor, to name the newborn. Juice realized that from now on everything was decided, and it was impossible to influence the course of events. Understanding between them was quite possible. Suddenly, an unfamiliar voice cut through the space. The boy was instantly seized with alertness. A questioning phrase flashed on his lips. "Who is here?" Kai-chan disappeared just as suddenly, as if dissolving into thin air. There was no trace of the Malusians either. The spatial movement took them into obscurity. The stranger did not hesitate to ask, "What are you really looking for?" Not letting her anxiety take over, the girl asked him to remain calm and assured him that she had only one question. Introducing herself as Olena, she waited for an answer. And Zeke, without taking his eyes off her, asked her what exactly the stranger had asked him. Finding the right words was a real challenge for her. Zeke had always tried to support anyone who needed it, even though she hadn't asked him to. And yet, it was clear now that this was exactly what everyone expected of him. Monsters, gods, fantastic beasts, and majestic dragons, creatures that in the real world would never even meet eyes, joyfully gathered around him, unexpectedly finding common ground and trust. It was impossible to understand how this could be possible in her home. Thinking about it over and over again, he came to the same conclusion each time. He extends his hand only to those who may be useful on his path. All others are brought to him by fate itself, those who seek to unravel his path and touch the power of the gods that he holds in his hands. Everything that happens around him is not a coincidence, but a direct response to his own choice. In his understanding, everything is extremely simple. There is no need to divide people and animals, because there is no difference between them. Zika, get a grip on yourself. Head was awash with confusion. He couldn't find any explanation for his feelings. As he walked, he muttered an apology, citing his own confusion. Meanwhile, Drew was distracted, his gaze involuntarily catching sight of some detail nearby. One of the girls instantly rose into the air and, looking anxiously at the boy, rushed to him with a request to run away together. They said that they were all in trouble. The patrol officers never received clear information about the time of arrival of the foreign guests. They only had to wait for official confirmation. McKinnon stood in confusion, not understanding either the essence of the conversation or the reason why he was mistaken for someone else. That arose required immediate and unconventional solutions. Taking advantage of the fact that he remained a stranger here, he bravely announced himself, not doubting his safety. Howard of Slot Macon was considered the most outstanding of the newly formed royal guards. The city had never seen such talent. The mystery of his unexpected appearance astonished all present. As he approached, one of the soldiers, barely restraining his attack, announced the hero's arrival and gave the order to throw the gates wide open. The door opened with a sharp kick. The soldier, stunned by such a bold act, asked in confusion what it all meant. In response, a reproach was heard. "The reason for the disorder is your indifference. No one here even tried to prepare properly." The last phrase was heard in an embittered tone. "Stop pestering with your meaningless fabrications." The controller, without hesitating for a moment, made a tough decision. This person did not meet the established standards at all, and his entry into the country was inadmissible. The stranger, as if nothing had happened, calmly declared that there was no reason to worry. He only had to let him pass. and then he would completely cope with everything on his own. The guard reacted to these words immediately, trying to stop the violator. Blade quietly cut through the massive gate of eternal stone, cutting through the barrier guarded by guards on all sides. The hero's invincible power knew no obstacles. He asked for permission to go further, but the relentless guard immediately blocked his path. According to the statute, entry is strictly prohibited. This greatly infuriated the boy. The simple performance continued, but Warren was clearly aware that the game had begun precisely on their initiative, so he felt no remorse. The mysterious power remained for them a darkness shrouded in secrets. Only one moment, and Mac could turn his magic against their dwellings, hiding behind their backs, and wipe the village from the face of the earth along with all its inhabitants. They had no doubt. After such a step, fear would grip everyone, and submission would come. From this very thought, a cold shiver ran through their veins. In his arsenal, capable of destroying not only their homes, but also the entire country. The miserable mortals did not even realize the threat they faced. However, at the crucial moment, an unknown force restrained his impulse. To the rescue! It was at this moment that he realized that standing before his eyes was none other than the legendary hero Maken, probably banished from the kingdom on purpose. It seems they were sent after him. The disappearance of the boy's magical power seemed like just a clever diversion, or something along those lines. No doubt, he was standing before a Sikh. This messenger had been sent by the king himself to bring the young man home. However, the king had chosen an unusual, even somewhat ridiculous way to persuade him, and the boy was about to see it with his own eyes. Hurried to his den, not wanting to check how unbearable the smell was in that nest. Besides, the deodorant was still lying around at home. Zeke's phrase, which advised him to go home, sank deeply into his soul. These words remained in his mind for a long time. Were heard, no longer a citizen of Gata, but a true inhabitant of Narakma, the kingdom of beasts, there would be no return. Mac felt a sharp pain in his soul. These confessions struck straight to the heart. A mad anxiety gripped Mac, trapped by yet another trick of Zeke's. Instead of giving in to his emotions, the hero turned to him with all his confidence. He urged him to show himself as a real adult and finally listen to his words. Stern reminder of the king's order to bring him alive did not go unnoticed. But the hero perfectly understood the true complexity of these words. What exactly is considered alive? Is it enough that the pursued person is still breathing? Or maybe it is only important that the heart does not stop? Or maybe it is enough to return him crippled, without an eye, and without magical power. And that will be enough to complete the mission. With the help of the holy sword, you can bring death upon Zik with a single wish. The paralysis worked flawlessly. The impulse to resist died out. The movement froze. The warrior's anxious gaze lingered on him, but the response was sharp. An angry shout forced silence. The order to retreat sounded like a final warning. Another step, and death would be inevitable. Surprise seized him. Paralysis was considered an elementary skill, worthy only of beginners. Could such a simple technique have been used to pierce him with a holy sword? Absurd. It seemed more like a cunning deception. Nakan concluded. Zeke had only created the appearance of skillfully using some other ability. He was advised to return home if he did not want to get into trouble. But such warnings only fueled the excitement in his heart. In his own eyes, he was a truly desperate warrior, chosen by the goddess herself. The barrier becomes an impenetrable barrier to all magic possessed by ordinary people. No spell, regardless of element, can penetrate this protective wall as long as it stands. Meanwhile, in its shadow, a force grows inexorably, prepared to utterly destroy Z. 130%. 120. McKean counted out, getting lost in the count, as if pronouncing his final sentence to himself. Having gathered all his magical power to the drop, he carefully erased even a hint of Zeke's presence from the horizon. However, the enemy did not stand still. He suddenly chose a different element. Instead of destructive lightning, piercing cold came. Sparks of snow swirled in the air, and blocks of ice grew. A miracle was read in the hero's eyes. Was Zeke really capable of such a transformation? McKean, following his opponent, carefully peered into the situation, not quite understanding it. But all attempts to harm him were shattered by a strong barrier. From that moment on, nothing could reach McKean. Magic Zek instantly stopped the enemy, and at the same time filled his body with an electric discharge. Stunned by the unexpected attack, the enemy anxiously asked what really happened to him. At the limit of his abilities, the protagonist used Miss Ice's alchemy, a supernatural skill granted to him by a contract with a dragon. The power of this power surpassed even that of the goddess, leaving the enemy in complete astonishment and disbelief at what he saw. During the fight, Ari's mastery of fog and ice alchemy increased by another 32 points. Despite the apparent defeat of his opponent, Zeke did not share the opinions of others. His confidence remained unshakable. One of the strongest heroes in the world, he turned to the fighters with a request to take him with them, categorically forbidding them to return. Long story about the events that had happened was told to the queen. Stepping into the hall, he announced that the young man was no longer there. Sent on a long journey. Silence fell upon the ruler. In her thoughts, she realized that she had perhaps made an irreparable mistake. No news has reached them, so the hero has set foot on their land as a messenger. Whatever one may say, the appearance of another stranger is unlikely to bring peace. Rather, it will add to the troubles. Zeke is seriously worried about this and feels deep sympathy. The trolls intervened abruptly, convincing everyone that the attack was initiated by the enemies, and that Zeke-san had only come to the defense of his comrades. They consider their only fault to be their inability to finish the case. They are ready to accept any punishment without hesitation. Finally, a great confession was made. Lisboy is Zeke's real name. Hearing in response that there was no question of any punishment, the king did not give in. He persistently pressed his case. If the world found out that they had kidnapped such an influential Zeke, the neighboring human states would certainly perceive this as a declaration of war. The consequences could turn into a large-scale armed conflict with all of humanity. Having assured everyone of his voluntary visit, he heard only the queen's cold disdain in response. Without proof before the whole world, his words remained an empty sound. The tension grew even more when one of the figures unexpectedly turned to Lady Sophia, was made to give Lord Zeke an honorary knighthood. Public recognition of his status as a respected citizen of Naragma would immediately make it more difficult for attempts to harm the city. Sophia and the boy unanimously approved of such a strategy. The realization that he was about to be crowned a nobleman shocked him to the core. The very appointment as chief physician seemed like a fantastic distinction, but Tiffany was struck by new news. Everything was just beginning. The title of royal person appeared on the horizon. There was also a solemn confirmation from Queen Sophia herself. The news struck the entire country, causing a wave of incredible astonishment. The news of the knighthood raised a wave of admiration among the residents. Exclamations of approval thundered not only within the walls of the parliament, but also echoed in the city squares. Interrupting each other, everyone enthusiastically shared their sympathy for her brother. The atmosphere changed a little because no one liked it when the main character suddenly disappeared from the party. In response, Zeke noted with a slight smile. Now that the official part and the ceremony were behind us, it was the perfect moment to simply dissolve in the evening's impressions. The drink was in her hands almost effortlessly. The local law allowed one to taste alcohol from 15, a rumor that added to the temptation. Without hesitation, the girl decided on the first sip and was pleasantly surprised by the perfect taste. Embarrassed by the direct words, the girl did not object. Indeed, she was still quite young, but she was eager to learn something unknown and open up new horizons. Unwavering confidence. There are boundaries that should not be crossed. At the very edge of Mint's thought, a vivid example was already floating, but an invisible force restrained her, forcing her to freeze for a moment. Zeke is the very young man to whom his sister recently asked about her identity. Despite his own confusion and lack of clear answers, he felt in his heart that this girl was unlikely to be hiding evil intentions. And Olena, in turn, clearly felt that she was also involved in their difficult story. Therefore, they needed to take her words into account. She turned to him for help, because only the experience of a skilled veterinarian could be useful to her. Through this girl's veins, he decided to challenge the authorities. The minister's impression of the events unfolding in the country knew no bounds. With every minute, anxiety gripped him more and more. Confusion gripped the mind. The source of the trouble remained incomprehensible. The guard briefly explained, these riots were an echo of popular anger. The outbreak of a dangerous epidemic on state farms had sharply raised food prices. In response, the guards could not cope with their own emotions. Order in the city was shaken, and over the past few days, time was running out. The need to act was urgent. By this point, the king was so exhausted that he could barely stand. Without a shadow of a doubt, he believed that all the troubles were caused by the heroes. Meekin, a true hero, would never forgive such a bastard. He would personally make sure that the criminal was punished. We will force him to see everything with his own eyes. The guard said that this state of affairs had continued since his return. Even the king's attempts to influence him ended in complete fiasco. The shouts of the warriors reached Meekin. A request to stop, not to disturb the others, sounded like a last reminder of honor. He was reminded that he was a hero, always an example of restraint for them. However, the young man exploded with anger, abruptly interrupted the conversation, ordered silence, and forbade him to show the way. With a look full of determination, the man noted. Although it was the king who united them, the true goal of their group was to defeat the demon lord, and this should not be forgotten. In response, a mocking laugh sounded. Surprise flashed in his eyes. The word team sounded simply funny to him, because he perceived these people only as a crowd of weaklings who could do nothing more than increase their numbers. If it weren't for him, a true hero, all these losers would have died long ago. And it was at this moment that it turns out that Seek, Vettel, and Ari have already fallen into the hands of their pursuers. Determined not to hesitate for a moment, the hero is filled with the desire to destroy the enemy right now. The news of the enemy's presence in the very heart of the Demon Lord's castle inflames the tension even more. Finally, the moment is set. A bloody massacre awaits, which can no longer be avoided. Before the boy's eyes in all its might, and admiration bound his movements. From the side, Elena quietly wondered if fear had crept into his soul. Despite the lack of anyone's support, the young man dismissed doubts about the treachery of this place without hesitation. The only thing that darkens his thoughts is the sudden appearance of the heroes. That is why Mint and his friends decided to stay behind. The young man wanted to see how determined the girl was in her intention to lead the stranger to the very abode of demons. In response, the words were heard. She is taking this step for the sake of saving her father. Powerlessness seized the princess, and she sank heavily to the ground. Trying to understand the reason for her condition, Zeke suggested that it could be the result of a curse. Suddenly, an unfamiliar woman appeared nearby. Her stern gaze and sharp voice left no doubt. She reproached the princess that she should not have done so at all. The loud and impolite noise in the crowd only caused Jem to condemn it. Her stern look and remarks immediately made it clear that such behavior was inappropriate. Curious, the castle residents asked why their princess had invited a frail-looking man into her chambers. In response, Zika sincerely apologized for his behavior, and without hesitation, gave his name. Perhaps that is so, but it is to him that one will have to answer. Now Jammer has taken on the role of Prime Minister, replacing the ailing ruler. He strongly warns against rash decisions. An interested look, the young man asked if the princess was feeling better. With a cautious smile, the girl replied that her well-being was more or less satisfactory. She asked her husband to examine her father, because none of the castle doctors had been able to alleviate the ruler's suffering, so only a fresh look could help. Jammer skeptically believed that such help was useless. After a while, Zeke and the princess silently left the room. Grabbing the boy's hand, the girl confidently led him to her father's chambers. A flash of insight struck Zeke. Her words had a hidden meaning. It turns out that even among demons, there are those who betray their own. It seems that this very sorcerer had cast a curse on Yulin. From what he had said, one could easily infer excessive stubbornness and conservatism. If the assumption was correct, then the demon lord's illness could also be the work of his hands. In his time, though none of them could match the power of Alenus's. Looking at him with interest, the girl asked what thoughts were raging in his mind about it. He had to agree. Everything was extremely bad. The fierce poison of the curse was stubbornly spreading through his body, like an invisible network, mercilessly destroying him from the inside. It was enough to at least try the usual treatment. Risky, everything could instantly crumble to pieces. The situation somehow pleased Jabber quite a bit. Finally it dawned on me. These were demons. Their appearance was striking with its unpredictable originality. They did not resemble either humans or beasts, or even any of the known monsters. Streams of bizarre magical energy raged around them, so unnatural that even the engine felt familiar. For me, this was a completely new and incomprehensible element, so the advisor could not help but ask what exactly had happened, in her memory, and it made her wonder if Elena shared her belief in such miracles. The girl confidently replied that she shared his beliefs and had unwavering trust in him. A broad smile lit up the minister's face, and his imagination was filled with wondrous images. It seemed as if the goddess herself had appeared and touched him. An unshakable confidence took possession of his thoughts. The true magic of healing was unfolding before his eyes. Absolute incomprehension reigned in their eyes. Healing magic, which heals any wounds in the world, turns into a deadly poison for demons. What would happen if such power were applied to a defenseless demon lord? Laughter burst out of his chest by itself. However, it was thanks to Zeke's spell that the demon lord regained consciousness. Realizing the place where fate had brought him, the man with sudden relief saw his daughter's native face before him. Radiant with joy, tears in her eyes, the girl instantly threw herself into her father's arms, and this moment of tender meeting struck Jim to the very depths of his soul and, calming his breathing after a long sleep, the demon lord finally realized that he had been awakened by an ordinary mortal. Thanking Zeke, an experienced doctor, for saving him, the demon sincerely expressed his gratitude. However, Zeke only smiled modestly, answering that he had only done his duty. The question of the cause of the events hung in the air, but the answer never came. Even the minister was left without an explanation. It would seem that healing magic should have become deadly for demons, because for them, it is like poison. Honesty did not allow him to assert with certainty, but his confidence in success did not lack for a moment. His divine abilities grew every day, as if strengthened by his meeting with Elaine, and his sincere desire to become better. Such frankness touched the girl to the very heart. The absurdity of the situation was staggering. No living soul was able to lift this curse. However, the demon lord suddenly realized the impossible had happened right before his eyes. Only a few desperate souls would have attempted such a thing. According to Jammer, he believed with all his heart that the supreme ruler would continue to be his obedient puppet. No way to fix anything. From now on, he had only one path ahead of him: to ruthlessly deal with anyone who dared to get in his way. Hideout is relatively safe, but her exhausted state does not allow her to count on victory in battle. It is futile to hope that the gastric juice will completely eat away at the obstacle. There is no time for that. Suddenly, she realizes, this room itself is an ingenious manifestation of Jammer's magic, and this decision was by no means accidental. Despite the impression, Elena feels disoriented and gets lost, pondering further actions. It is at this moment that Zeke calms her down, offering to rely on him. The laughter did not subside, echoing around. Whatever Zeke had imagined before, using a mixed magic beast was not even planned, but the circumstances left no room for hesitation. He instantly turned to the powerful power of Frost MLA's alchemy, summoning it outward. Jammer, a creature created through secret experiments as the perfect weapon against the demon lord himself, had proved powerless against an ordinary human. This incredible victory was won by Zeke Kato Lane. The time for retribution had come, but Jammer held back his impulse. The decisive moment had not yet arrived. In a resolute voice, he ordered the armies of demon lords to crush their enemies to dust. The realization that command of the entire army had passed to him ignited an unexpected confidence in the lord's soul. Instead, fear gripped Elena. The paralysis spell from Zika held her in an iron grip, deprived of even the slightest hint of freedom. Without delay, activate the teleportation magic. An epiphany flashed in his mind. Teleportation crystals are again involved in all these events. First Zoroa appeared, then the elf, and now this case. It seems as if someone is buying up these artifacts en masse. The Lord explained. The creator of the crystals is Jamar, who generously distributes them to anyone who wants them. All the circumstances hinted. It was this figure who was behind everything that was happening. Still, the real shock for the Lord was that a simple human doctor managed to crush their army to pieces. The young witness could not understand how the powerful demon lord, the ancient enemy of all mankind, managed to maintain such cold calm and self-control. At the same time, for Elena, although it is not known what impression he made on the majority, His father was the unchanging ideal of a ruler and a gentle, caring father. The Lord realized it was not for nothing that his name aroused both respect and fear. The mention of the demon lord's curse rang in the air like an echo of alarm. Zeke immediately confirmed that every monster on Earth was subject to this terrible punishment. Their minds were darkening, and cruelty against people was awakening in their souls. The Lord calmly agreed, noting that all this trouble was not his fault. Finally, he suggested that it was better to see with your own eyes once than to hear 100 times. The body was adorned with a symbol that unmistakably indicated the owner of a demonic entity. Suddenly it became clear. All this was a curse from the founder himself. Has been revealed. It was left by Belial himself, the first lord of demons, the ancestor of their race. This demonic symbol passes to each new king and never disappears. As long as the mark exists, the entire demonic race and creatures remain in complete submission to its power. Such power only strengthens the position of the Lord, giving him even more invincible power. However, this symbol reflects exclusively those ideals that Bolil gave birth to. Therefore, no matter how many centuries or even millennia pass, the confrontation between demons and humanity will not fade away. The eternal enmity will continue. According to her, not every demon craves senseless battles. After all, her father dreamed of harmonious coexistence. To this the Overlord added, Yamra cunningly exploited this weakness. He asked about the curse. If no one objected, he cautiously offered his help in removing it. Jammer dared to test his strength. Could he overcome the curse that had weighed on the demonic kings for centuries? Sik was well aware that the chances of victory were almost nil, but his faith did not fade, the strength to be a support for those who suffer. He is unable to leave them alone with their troubles. Penetrating gaze did not leave the Lord indifferent. Hopes for salvation flared up. It was time to let go of doubts and open his heart, entrusting him with a difficult task, to break the chain of an ancient curse. The willingness to sacrifice his own life raged within him in order to save future generations from the burden of this curse. Kneeling before the mighty figure, the realization of the true nature of the interlocutor struck like thunder. It was God himself, the ancient lord of demons. Among them all, the strongest one stands out. His speech often touches on topics that are beyond comprehension, but despite this, the key to the whole mystery lies in his hands. The cursed mark instantly awakened a powerful force. Power envelops everyone without exception, even demonic lords and gods. Suddenly, understanding comes. Zek's magic spreads like invisible threads throughout the castle. Zeke, Fettel, and Ari were given the honorary title of Saviors by the Demon King himself. Their essences evolved, and Dr. Salvation was born. Queen Sophia was relieved that he was okay. Lord had no idea that the poisonous curse had not only gripped him, but also the entire castle. Therefore, breaking the magical bonds proved to be a real mystery. Amazing knowledge astounds the young man. With a smile, the boy replies, Everything was decided by the fate of the gods. The master remarks, Even modesty loses its meaning if it is not used wisely. And it seems he feels relief, saying, It is good that something like this happened recently. Thanks to Zeke's efforts, the Demon Kingdom was finally able to move on. The princess fully shared his opinion and sincerely thanked the young man. Inviting him here turned out to be a real stroke of luck. It was at this moment that an important memory flashed in the doctor's mind. Enough for Lana to close her eyelids for a moment. The girl whispered uncertainly. It turned out that the boy had never lifted the curse from her. Although now it seemed that everything should fall into place. A strange expression flashed across her face. The princess asked him to refrain from joking with her. Zeke just blinked in confusion, not understanding what was going on. As soon as the order to summon the demonic lord was given, a familiar voice responded, and the boy instantly remembered who it belonged to. Macon intended to wipe everyone off the face of the earth, leaving not a single living soul behind. New friends have already appeared nearby. It has not gone unnoticed. Hopeless stupidity surpassed even Sik's worst expectations. Even the simplest things seemed beyond his grasp, and his desire to learn anything new was completely lacking. They admitted their hasty carelessness. They opened the lock only so that Zek could get inside. In response, the main character assured them that there was no need to worry. Nothing bad had happened. It seemed that the enemy had appeared only to overthrow the demon lord himself. But suddenly, he heard soothing words. There was no longer any reason for anxiety. Zek dispelled the curse that made monsters and demons lose their minds with rage. Continuing the fight had lost all meaning, and the enemy could not hide his surprise at this news. Arises. Did he really not see? The demon lord never desired destruction. His only dream was a quiet, peaceful life for his tribe. But for Maken it does not matter. No excuses are needed to settle accounts with the Lord, regardless of who he is, noble or treacherous. After this confession, an oppressive silence falls between the three. To this was a gloomy prediction. The matter would continue. The ruler had nowhere to run. He would pay for the sins that had marked him with dishonor. Even if the tortures lasted 100 days, forgiveness would be unattainable. Zeke could only resign himself to it. It was no longer possible to turn everything back. One of the opponents raised an impenetrable barrier that momentarily darkened everything around, as if an impenetrable shadow had covered the battlefield. Using the heavenly demon palm technique, the hero struck such a powerful blow that the very ground beneath his feet split and collapsed. It was noted that the true heroism of these warriors was immediately noticeable. They stood apart from all the others. With his characteristic nonchalance, the narrator allowed himself a little joke, recalling how Z once managed to unexpectedly defeat him. However, now there will be no such chance. He will not give an easy victory again. Destroy your enemies and make them answer for every crime. Brzez from his own team started to do magic. With the help of magic, it was possible to establish the exact location of the demigod. Rang out, and the darkness froze tensely. The demon lord's gaze focused on the honed skill and coordinated work of the squad. He sensed danger in their actions, and from that moment on, he did not take his eyes off them. This power was painfully familiar. The first wave of triumph had barely reached their hearts when a sudden objection was heard from a comrade. The enemy was still breathing. The juice remained whole and unharmed. The heroes could not help but notice that his fingers were tightly gripping some object. The mystery of the sacred sword puzzled Jimmy. The reason for its appearance in his hands remained incomprehensible. Zeke was also surprised, unable to find an explanation for such an incredible event. In the hands of the Lord, this sword absorbed the power of a true hero. It was precisely this nourishment that it lacked. There was an unshakable confidence in his voice, an indifference to doubts and possible mistakes. Behind it there was more than just stubbornness. There was no room for two heroes in this world. One of the companions suddenly realized, the right to be called a hero here belongs to only one. These words came at the right moment, perfect for this moment, because Zeke was special, one of a kind. But the next surprise made him jump. Elton's legendary warrior, Tam, appeared before him. Without a shadow of a doubt, Zeke gave him his trust, ready to put even his own life on the line, not notice the meaningless words falling from his lips. He urged him to abandon the service of this fool, because only Beck remained his true guide. Then the warrior asked, "Will he be able to summon the sacred sword?" Feeling unshakable confidence in his abilities, he firmly believed that anything was possible with a brave heart. However, despite all his courage, the attempt ended in failure. Dawned. Maken had lost his heroic image. It seemed as if even the goddess had turned away from him. The king remained in complete confusion. What had he done to deserve such insulting contempt? The guard urged to remain calm and wait until the angry crowd left the castle walls. Rogael, however, spoke contemptuously of his subordinates, calling them foolish and ungrateful and neglectful of royal duty and honor. The furious wave of popular anger instantly grew into a riot, and the monarch was forced to hastily leave his own stronghold. They wondered where the prime minister had disappeared to. The guard replied that he hadn't noticed him nearby. The high-ranking official had probably just put down the riot. The discontent had not yet subsided when a shimmering portal appeared nearby. The guard instantly identified it as traces of teleportation and immediately called on everyone to remain alert. Suddenly, everyone rushed back, jumping as far away from the portal as possible. A warning of danger sounded from the lips of Zeke, urging caution. The demon lord hastened to apologize. It became obvious that he had made a regrettable mistake with the teleportation coordinates. The king, without a moment's hesitation, recognized Zeke as the newcomer. It is not known for what reason this guy appeared here and now. Rogael was convinced. All this is not happening for no reason and concerns him personally. The mysterious surroundings further increased the tension. The strangers standing nearby seemed even more mysterious because their intentions remained unsolved. Those present held their breath, full of expectation, when an explanation of what was happening would finally be heard. Gaze did not leave the narrator, catching his every gesture and word. The story implied, Sikh Vettel, together with Ari, deprived Macon of the honorary title of hero. Both decided to have a personal meeting with the Demon Lord, where they skillfully convinced him to reconsider his decision. Admittedly, this development of events greatly puzzled and amazed the ruler. Confirmation left no doubt in his face. Now that Zeke's power is in his hands, there is no reason to fight the human world anymore. He sincerely asks for forgiveness for all the crimes committed by the demons. The king ironically notes that for a demon lord, he turned out to be surprisingly restrained in his words. At this moment, Rogel expresses admiration. Zeke not only defeated the demon lord, but also managed to take him prisoner. A true hero. The king's desire to talk about demons was unexpected. His order to organize a public execution shocked Zeke. He had not expected such cruelty. The monarch explained, "One only needs to reassure people, and they will talk about him as the one who returned peace to this world." In response, Zeke cautiously asked what exactly the ruler had in mind. They advised him not to worry. This honorable mission would be entrusted to Zeke. However, the young man indignantly objected. The demon lord cannot be considered the personification of evil. The curse that forced him to do evil was eventually broken by his own willpower. From now on, neither demons nor monsters will ever threaten humanity again. Confidence was unshaken. The events of the past could not be changed, even if the curse had lost its power. This sacrifice was only a small payment, worth one life. The king shared this view and expressed sincere gratitude for the wisdom and compassion shown. His thoughts were already wandering to the future. With the payment received, new prospects for the extermination of other monsters opened up. As soon as these monsters grew up, it would only become easier to defeat them. His imagination painted a grand arena where the townspeople could enthusiastically watch the monster hunts, an exciting pastime for everyone. However, on this path he was suddenly stopped by Zeke, in indignation, to which Zeke calmly drew the hero's sacred sword. The ruler's gaze immediately fell on the familiar relic. He recognized it without hesitation. According to the ruler, the blade of the sword sparkled no less brightly than his own greatness, and the supernatural power of this weapon made even Lad Tur and the most powerful kings tremble. Not fully aware of his own actions, Zeke finally spoke. "The decision is final. The matter is resolved. Will emerge in which there will be a place for everyone. Even creatures that have hitherto been on the sidelines will find true shelter and peace here." The thoughts of those around him drifted around suspicion. It seemed that Zeke had lost his mind. But his persistence knew no bounds. His conviction was as firm as a rock. Even the creatures they call monsters deserve peace and harmony, no less than humans or the lesser creatures of the world. The real problem is that many of them have caused a lot of suffering to people. Some did not even experience these events, so the dissatisfaction is completely understandable. The dream was to found a country where everyone who had once been rejected or oppressed could finally experience harmony and peace. In time, Sikh convinced himself, the inhabitants of such a land would realize that there was no difference between them. Everyone was equal, no matter how their lives began. To Rogel, these conversations seemed like delusions and nonsense, an idea that Sikh was unable to realize on his own. However, in response, he heard the certainty. There was no loneliness here. He was not alone in this desire. In the high sky above, majestic dragons soared. Among them were Queen Sophia, Dragon King Elron, and a whole cohort of loyal allies, each ready to join his side. Zeke still had powerful allies at his disposal, the Queen of Beasts, the Dragon King, the Demon Lord, and their number was growing. Rogel understood that Zeke probably planned to conquer the whole world, and, perhaps, aspire to occupy the throne of the Demon Lord. However, such power did not appeal to him at all. These ambitions remained alien to Rogel himself. If necessary, he will easily take on this role. The thought that the path to the title of Lord promised an easy way out of the situation flashed through the man's mind. The idea arose spontaneously. It would be wise to choose a title for himself that would not inspire fear among people and would not seem threatening to them. The news that Sikh Vettel and Ari now held the title of Demon Lords spread quickly throughout the world. Their rebirth became a symbol of hope, as saviors for every living being emerged. From the very first meeting in the silence of the forest, she had a strange premonition. Everything would unfold exactly as it was supposed to. Having chosen his own path, the hero will always feel her support and care by his side. Immediately became indignant. How could anyone assume that she felt like a wife? The real support for Zeke was found right next to him. But Mint had her own opinion. Her confidence did not leave her for a moment. Undoubtedly, the devotion of the bra and completely belongs to her. However, Kai-chan did not give in here either. These two cannot even come close to competing with her greatness. The owner asks Zeke to take care of Olena, and the young man, without hesitation, accepts the task. The master mockingly asks if Rogal has finally realized how difficult his situation is. From now on, all that remains is to helplessly watch the events unfold. The king, however, ironically asks if anyone will really believe in this whole unsavory trick and heed their appeals. Astonishing. Humanity had already rallied to fight them. Moreover, news of the threat had spread rapidly to neighboring states, and they, impressed by the heroic deeds of the local dragons, had no hesitation in offering aid and support. Sadness seized them, for their attempts to persuade him to join had proved futile. The Dragon King bid him farewell with a particularly warm and sincere heart, asked what to do next, but his confusion prevents him from answering. At this moment, the king intervenes, taking the initiative himself. I wondered what desire had brought him here. Meanwhile, the second guard already had some information. It became known that the townspeople, having seized the castle, demanded the abolition of the monarchy. Parliament agreed to their terms, and a revolution broke out in the country. The kingdom was on the verge of destruction. Not the slightest idea of the essence of the conversation flashed in his eyes. With sincere regret, the first guard apologized. His family was at home, and he could not accompany Rogel further, so he had to leave them. Following him, the second guard also made his choice and left. In despair, Vlad desperately begged not to leave him alone. The appearance of the minister high in the sky caused him genuine surprise. He asked with irony whether he had really learned to fly, or if he was joking. Apparently, someone had concluded that the minister was now much more needed than he was. Without realizing it, he rushed forward while a dark shadow from the sky descended menacingly. All thoughts revolved around one thing: to find Fettel and Ark as quickly as possible. It remained a mystery whether he had really conscientiously performed his duties at her table. With a joyful exclamation, the girl boasted that she had already finished her homework and hurried to get ready for Zeke. The queen turned to face her. Having announced the creation of a new state, he immediately began to implement his great plan. Strength, combined with Zeke's support, became the driving force behind dramatic changes in the Demon Lord's possessions. Once lifeless deserts were gradually filled with life, and dry lands were covered with fresh greenery. New resources are constantly emerging, which we are successfully developing. Horrors and monsters of untold power gathered from all corners of the world, and alongside them, those whose thoughts aligned with ZX's ambitions, flocking to this place from the most distant lands. In an instant, the hero's domain became one of the most glorious cities on the entire continent. Castle greeted Tiffany as she resolutely flew inside, passionately dreaming of finally meeting him. Presence was felt even before Dorothy saw the familiar face. It was immediately clear. The guest had come again. The princess did not hesitate to ask about the girl's life. In response, a sincere smile sounded. Everything was fine, because Juice and the others were treating her surprisingly warmly. Surprised to learn that Zeke had disappeared again, abandoning all duties to her at the behest of the Demon Lord. This turn of events seemed completely unexpected, but deep down she believed that Zeke would never waste time without a good reason. The examination showed that the cow was strong and had no health problems. This news could not but make the farmer happy. Relief and joy filled his heart. Despite the slight anxiety about the new surroundings, the anxiety quickly dissipated. The interlocutor first addressed Zeke as Mr. Zeke, and later, having come to his senses, called him the Demon Lord. However, for Zeke, these titles were empty words. He never felt like a lord or a hero, despite the opinions of others. Immediately after the farmer's approval and hearty laughter, a young girl unexpectedly approached the veterinarian. Having eagerly accepted the treat, the boy drank the fresh milk with pleasure. From the first sip, the boy caught a unique taste. Every drop of milk seemed to radiate real, sincere care. The girl, watching him carefully, could not hold back a smile. Her heart was instantly filled with warm joy. Gratitude shone in the girl's eyes, and calm words were spoken in response. They had already done everything they could. The girls finally found her. The farmer was happy to meet the demonic lady, warmly welcoming her back to her home. Zeke got under Chan's hot hand. She displeasedly reprimanded him that quitting his job was no joke, and if he was going to do something stupid, at least do it like a human being. However, Chan immediately added that the guy was already overloading himself with things. Zeke was left confused and not understanding whether Chan was scolding him or praising him. Thinking about it, he remembered with surprise how long it had been since he had seen her in this incarnation. At this, Kai-chan only smiled, saying that she would always remain his feet, no matter what form she took. The meaning for her did not change in any way. A feeling of gratitude overwhelmed Zeke, but Tiffany could not help but wonder what was so upsetting to Mint. However, Cyril still could not understand the essence of her disappointment. Mint, despite the fact that she already holds the honorary position of head librarian, dreamed of something else, about working together under one roof in the castle. But his constant employment outside the home and the transfer of all office routine to her alone shattered these hopes. Finally, tired of waiting, Mint dared to ask for a transfer, with a sudden gesture. The man reminded her that her work was of great importance to the younger generation. The future of the entire country depended on it, and that was why the children counted so heavily on her support. These words deeply touched her heart and made her think. She realized that she had no other choice. For the sake of her children, for the sake of her own fate and the well-being of her brothers, she would spare nothing. The young man once again confidently reminded her, all this is for the sake of the future of her native land. It was noon, and Zeke invited them to have lunch together as soon as the group reached the castle. The proposal made the girls smile, so they decided to invite Xia to join them. Belongs to the dark demonic realm. Sincere words of gratitude to Mr. Rouget for his selfless rescue, and he greeted the rescuer with special warmth. On the throne, towering above all, sat the demonic Lord Rouget, the embodiment of invincible majesty. The realization that it was this support that had saved him from the inevitable submission of the god's army weighed heavily on his heart. However, the ruler stubbornly remained silent, which only increased the astonishment of the man he had freed. To change the course of the conversation, Ryu decided to carefully direct his rescuer's attention in another direction. Before his eyes, the very one he had recently managed to capture, his gaze caught clear signs of hunger in the creature. But despite this, it stubbornly refused to touch the food. Perhaps something was wrong. The experience of caring for pets had remained alien to him until this moment. When asked about his pet's diet, the owner answered grimly, he leaves him a meal of human remains. Despite all the transformations, deep down, he remained the same person. That's why he suggested that his pet change his diet, try animal meat instead of the usual one. The owner willingly supported this idea. Jammer never understood the reason for his self-mutilation, looking around in confusion. Bruce, meanwhile, remained unmoved. He simply said curtly that he was just following the established rules. True power is revealed only to those who are able to absorb it from those who have already mastered it. When asked about the source of this power, the answer was, it was the true power of God, who lifted the curse from the founder. The thought of such dependence on the part of his father and Alina seemed so incredible that it was difficult to even comprehend it. He cut Jamru short with a few words. He said that he was going to rest, and asked to wake him up later. The thought of overcoming the power of a god himself was utterly bewildering. Bruce remained indifferent to such doubts. Rage boiled in his chest, consuming the remnants of restraint. The man first set his eyes on the mysterious divine force, firmly deciding to deal with it first, postponing the meeting with the young man named Z until later. If the enemy does not fall at his hands, the Demon Lord's freshly minted army will deal with him right in the backyard of Vidalanari Castle. The delicious appearance of the dishes caused everyone to be surprised and disbelieving. Is this really Miatka's culinary magic? It turned out that the appetizing treats were created by Miatka. Every day she invents similar culinary magic for her brother, and usually only he tastes this delight. But this time, everything is different. Without listening to the end, the boy interjected that he had the habit of inviting one of his friends to lunch together every day. Tiffany had only dreamed of such an invitation. At that time, Kai-chan wondered why there was so much fuss about homemade lunch. After all, if she really wanted to, she could easily prepare a lunchbox for herself without anyone's help. Through her mind, when a botched gift of dead mice to her brother had only irritated Kai-chan. Tension hung in the air, but Zek spoke cautiously, reminding everyone that everyone had their own tastes. Tilting her head to one side, she sincerely confessed her fondness for rats, and holding her breath asked, did her lover share her fascination with these creatures? Chan was eager to master the art of preparing a delicious dinner, while Tiffany eagerly anticipated the delicious event. The conversation naturally turned to the topic of learning. Valena, a true library regular, enthusiastically shared her impressions of the books she had recently discovered. Valena thoughtfully pointed out that she was the true demon princess, residing in the very heart of their kingdom. In response, Zeke confidently confirmed that they lived there with her father. After they finally managed to free themselves from the curse of the founder, if Valena, to find oneself in complete confusion due to an unexpected event, the girl, engrossed in reading on a high branch, had no idea that someone else was about to join her. The unexpected guest silently climbed up and stood next to her, frightening her quite a bit with his sudden appearance. Carefully lifting the girl into his arms, he sincerely said the words of apology. Eyes sparkled with surprise when he was asked how he had known about her presence. Zeke, with a meaningful smile, admitted that the answer lay in the power of God. This ability gave him the ability to sense every movement and intention of everyone around him within a radius of about 500 meters. The assumption turned out to be correct. The boy's gaze fell on the medical textbook that the girl was carefully studying. His gaze told him, Elena was extremely diligent in her studies. The reason for this, as the girl herself admitted, was a feeling of failure. Neither witchcraft could be mastered, nor martial arts could be mastered. Inviting her to sit down, the Lord assured her that he was ready to listen carefully to every word, if the interlocutor so desired. The princess sincerely thanked him for his kindness. Her origin was already known. The girl was born the daughter of the demon lord himself. Any talent upon her. Those who had once carefully watched her first step in life disappeared from her horizon one by one. And soon the silence of absolute loneliness spread around her, across their faces, and they didn't even try to hide it. The realization suddenly hit. She would never have said such words to a stranger. Horror enveloped the entire essence of the moment. The girl's answer sounded quite predictable. She lacked the strength or traits that a demon leader needed. At first, the girl was convinced that she would cope with her father's illness on her own. It seemed that she only had to overcome this misfortune, and the world would look back in her direction again. She had a strong conviction in her heart. She was fully capable of this challenge. However, hopes were dashed, leaving behind the bitterness of disappointment. The girl's condition steadily worsened, and the pressure from those around her intensified. The former allies who had once advised and supported her rose so high that they eventually deprived her of the right to lead the Demon King's army. Thus, she eventually became only a symbol. A luxurious but powerless decorative princess. If only her father and brother's talents in politics or Zeke's medical knowledge would be useful to her. But instead, inside she feels only acute disappointment and bitterness because of her own helplessness. I firmly believe that governing an entire country is an ability not bestowed upon everyone. Only thanks to the support of God himself was it possible to withstand this enormous burden, although now nothing can be changed. Enough feeling sorry for yourself, Elena agreed, sincerely thanking him for his openness in this conversation. With a slight apology for the distraction, the princess did not hide her joy. She was overwhelmed with gratitude for being listened to attentively. Being in this place, she actually felt a noticeable relief and peace that she had long lacked. Suddenly, a confession was made. Politics was not his calling at all, but the medical profession would become a reliable support for him, came from him to become his student. Having made an important decision, the girl immediately began to train on her own. Chan looked around in surprise, trying to understand the reason for such a commotion. Tiffany hurried to explain. Z, it seems, is going to take Elena under his wing as a student. Kai-chan was perplexed. Why exactly should he teach her? Because, if I'm not mistaken, Mint's brother is an ordinary veterinarian? At this time, the princess was already taking the first steps on the path of new training. The woman didn't look like a veterinarian at all. Mint had no doubt that she would learn many valuable skills with him. Zeke decided to start with the basics. As they climbed the rocky ledges, Mint joked that her brother was not at all suited to be a mentor. In response, he confidently replied that although he could limit himself to dry theories, he would prefer to teach her things that would actually be useful in real life. Easily and confidently, like a mountain goat, the boy demonstrated all the skills of climbing rocks. In Elena's hands was a Haina snowbell flower, a rare plant that only breaks through to the light on sheer cliffs over 800 meters high. Locals have long valued this beauty for its ability to destroy parasites. Sometimes the patients were creatures hiding on the cloud-covered mountaintops, and only a skilled Aryan could obtain the rare ingredients. Inspired by this, Elena wanted to follow suit, but her desire faded when the boy stopped her daring impulse. Magic in this situation will only harm. One has only to show witchcraft, and the spirits of the forest will sense the alien power, and the gray shadow of the monster can immediately understand the trick. The safest thing for a deer is to overcome the slope on its own, relying only on its own strength, without resorting to any miracles. However, these efforts proved futile. Next training session was scheduled for the coast. That's what the coach said. He glanced curiously. Did she notice the same call? That was the end of it. His imagination painted a fantastic picture. A wounded unicorn seemed to be left on the sand. Then the guy wondered, what would she do if she were in her place? Faced with the prohibition on magic, she had no choice but to throw herself into the water. Zeke's call was stern. Kai-chan had to jump. A flash of alarm flashed in her eyes. It became clear that they planned to use her as a visual warning to everyone and everyone else. Not everyone realizes how skillfully this girl swims. As soon as she stepped into the water, she suddenly came across unusual creatures hiding at the bottom of the lake. She didn't have time to guess what their special feature was, because she didn't have a minute to think. Stories about kelpies, treacherous water spirits that inhabited the lake and lurked for unwary travelers. Tai-chan confirmed these rumors, warning them to stay away from the water. Indignation took the place of anticipation, but the question emerged of its own accord. Imagining her cautiously entering the water, Zeke did not expect her to jump in from a running start. In fact, the girl admitted, the feeling was not the most pleasant. Apologized to her. The kelpies had been rather naughty lately, and the poor princess had begun to berate herself, thinking she was failing in her duties. Fortunately, Kai-chan had cheered her up, convincing her that it was all Zeke's fault and that she was not at fault. A slight shadow of envy flashed through Chan's mind as she involuntarily admired the elegance of the adult beauty. However, Ment assured her that she shouldn't worry, because intelligence would be the best weapon on the way to her brother's heart. The girls found a common language quite quickly, and the guy, noticing the warmth of their communication, realized that it was time to get to the point. Thoughts revolved around the question, what would Elena do in such a situation? Various options flashed through her imagination, but none of them, neither magic nor skillful swimming, could help. Inside, the mention of this stirred in her heart an association with an old riddle. Zeke could not help himself and, smiling enthusiastically, immediately voiced the solution. The circumstances were so difficult that even a bold step across the water seemed like a great victory. Kai-chan's thoughts were confused as he searched for a way to overcome this obstacle without any magical support. Mint explained in detail. First, you should carefully place one foot on the water's surface, and while it is still on the surface, quickly push the other forward. Repeat the actions over and over again, moving step by step. Kai-chan instantly regretted her question. This advice seemed to her to be complete nonsense. Mint would have recognized a terrible mentor in her brother without a shadow of a doubt. Why not? Kai replied, choosing his usual path. Elena, on impulse, decided to test his idea. Mint, with a warm smile, advised not to worry too much about her brother's words. Before her, and having overcome it, she felt real pride. All the girls present could not hide their surprise at such a result. In Tiffany's opinion, only Zeke could teach, although Mint completely denied this possibility. The kelpies shook their heads in delight, expressing their sincere joy for the princess. The kelpies had truly become her support. They promised to make any of her dreams come true and sincerely rejoiced in her joys, giving happy moments of joint leisure. Meanwhile, Zeke noticed that these creatures felt much less hostility towards her than towards the princess. The creatures seemed to have lifted their veils, their eyes filled with genuine joy for her. Zeke explained that the mist inside was nothing more than a primordial curse, the source of which was difficult to determine, whether it had originated with them or had appeared through Gemma. It seemed that this was the reason why she was treated with caution within the castle walls. However, the lifting of the curse opened up new opportunities for Elena. Finally, a chance to establish relations with those who had previously kept aloof. This realization fueled hope in her. The Kelpies sincerely accepted Elena into their circle, and she was truly happy to discover new friends. Directly, from now on he would not have to limit himself in the use of magic. The certainty was unshakable. It was she who would undoubtedly find a more successful approach to these creatures than he could. One of the amazing creatures even asked the doctor for an autograph, and this surprise did not embarrass him in the least. The question about their names came unexpectedly, to which the monsters answered in unison. They are Kelpies. The princess noted that such creatures usually do not have personal names. Mint explained. In the world of magical creatures, personal names are a rare thing. Imagination immediately drew names for each: Baby Kelpie, Charming Kelpie, and Kelpina. To Kai Tian, these sounded too childish. For the first time, an understanding appeared. Even such a brother, seemingly invincible, was also not without vulnerabilities. Despite this, Kai Tian sincerely appreciated her own name. It sounded melodious and pleasant to her. In Tiffany's opinion, such a name would be remembered without effort, even by a baby M. But Zeke was irritated by the endless reproaches. But suddenly the mood of the Kelpies changed noticeably. He was called Master Zeke. The experience of the trials he had endured tempered his spirit, and a profound inner metamorphosis took place. In the name of the Lord and the Princess, their promise to become even more faithful and devoted, striving to bring even more benefit, was uttered. It was impossible to recognize these elves as the same beings. So exalted, majestic, almost divine in appearance had they become that Mate found it hard to believe. Unspeakable astonishment seized her. It was impossible to imagine that just one word spoken by Z could awaken such a striking change. Meanwhile, Mate approached Kai Tian. To her he also entrusted the special gift of a name. The realization came suddenly. All the brotherly power meant nothing if there was no real basis. Kai-chan was cunning again, trying to deceive. In the heat of the moment, Tiffany had a burning thought. Z had the ability to summon someone else. He himself had once been summoned into this world in the same way. It turned out that it was she who initiated the attack. This truth was personally witnessed by the Dragon Lord himself. The question of the reason for their presence made Elrond feel that it was time to act. Matt understood that for Shay, a turning point was coming, when change became inevitable. A premonition gripped Zeke as well, for it was from him that the call came to her. The king noted that dragons possess magical reservoirs that are impressive in strength and volume, far surpassing any other creatures. Even the most miniature wings of these majestic creatures demonstrate a higher level of development and power than those of ordinary magical creatures. That is why the path of evolution for her promises to be easier and faster. One small but amazingly attractive dragon appeared before the young man's eyes in human form, an equally charming girl. His admiration for the new face only increased his interest in further cooperation, and her willing consent only strengthened this mood. Question about whether she should be the first to greet the elders if she was going to join Andrage hung in the air. Mint, without hesitation, advised her to keep her distance and not get too close to him. Once Chan had indeed been defenseless, like a small dragon cub, but now she was not going to put up with injustice. However, fear slowly enveloped her soul. The uncertainty in the boy's behavior made Elrond wonder if their presence was only adding to the tension in the air. Finding no place to sit, he decided to leave. Instead, Zeke imagined that the king had come solely to witness her transformation. Now it looked as if he had officially placed her in Zeke's care. Taylor emphasized that the desire to care for her has not disappeared in the slightest. However, for her continued growth, it is vital to provide proper stimulation. Joyfully hugging her friend, she confessed in a whisper how much she liked her. A smile flickered across the girl's face as she realized that in these short days, she had managed to gain the friendship of the demon princess herself. Until recently it had seemed impossible, but without Zeke, the meeting would never have taken place. Meanwhile, the conversation turned to the boy. The question was asked, did he know the name Onigashima? But Zeke shrugged. It was the first time he had heard that name. The story unfolded before the eyes of a picturesque island hidden in the southern seas. The land there, imbued with magic, gives a feeling of real wonder to everyone who steps on it. The young man's question about whether Mint is familiar with this magical place was met with a quick answer. The island is famous as a mecca for tourists and pilgrims who seek to visit mystical places of power. However, as the girl notes, bizarre rumors have been spreading recently. It has allegedly become dangerous on the island. The assurance sounded confidently. There was no reason for concern, because very recently, he had personally visited those lands and was convinced that the former comfort and indescribable beauty reigned there. The words dispelled the girl's doubts. She disappeared, admitting her mistake to the eyewitness. The king decided to act immediately. They would begin the journey on their own, and there was no doubt. This place would certainly appeal to her. It seemed that a change of scenery would be a real salvation for her tired brother. Fresh impressions and rest promised to restore his good mood. The anticipation of adventure was already stirring the imagination. The journey promised so much. Elena wished the company an unforgettable vacation with a kind heart. The news that she would not be traveling with the rest caught Tiffany by surprise. The princess, on the other hand, wondered with hope whether she was really allowed to go with everyone. The friendly relations between them were not in doubt. When the princess unexpectedly suggested that they relax and have fun together, Elena was pleasantly surprised by this offer. Zeke quickly picked up on this idea, because there were still many lessons left for the student. From now on, the training was to continue on Onigashima. The general agreement was unanimous. Kai-chan and Mint insisted that they would not let her out of sight for a moment. They dutifully promised to keep an eye on each other, during the fight, in the bathroom, and even before they went to bed at night. Such excessive attention did not please Zika at all. Having reached the solution, the main character confidently decided that all questions were resolved. Logic dictated. Since their path leads to an island in the South Sea, a boat or other transport would be indispensable. However, it turned out that the king had already gotten ahead of their plans, having turned to his acquaintances with a request for help with transportation. Zeke sincerely thanked him for his foresight. Elrond, saying goodbye, wished them a good journey and asked them to take special care of Shia. The heroes gathered their things and began to make the final preparations before sailing. Returning to the castle walls, the hero recounted in detail all the events that had happened. Together with Zeke and her companions, she set off for Onigashima, which caused sincere joy in the queen. Upon learning of this, Elrond could not refrain from asking questions, seeking to unravel the reason for such joy. Erwin announced that this island territory was recognized as a zone of increased danger. A new species of magical beasts had been caught here. In addition, according to the latest rumors, unrest reigns on the island, so the place is not at all suitable for walks. The king confirmed that he had heard similar information from his subjects, but reassured everyone. Elrond personally visited the island and testified, no unrest was found there. They asked him when he had last seen this figure. It turned out that more than 500 years had passed since that encounter. The man thoughtfully admitted that apparently it was true. A real dragon was standing before him. Soon the table was to be adorned with juicy roast lamb and tender flounder. The shrewd servant, noticing with what delight the guest savored each dish, could not help but be curious and asked, why did he do it that way? But at that moment, the man was stunned like a thunderbolt by the appearance of the angry king, whose hatred for Zeke had not yet subsided and only burned even stronger. A close look around revealed the true nature of Onigashima to them, and the truth was shocking. The words of gratitude addressed to the dragon sounded sincere. It was he who had become their guide to this place. However, the powerful creature calmly replied that it had not presented any difficulties for it. His warning about the danger on this island caught Zika by surprise, filling him with astonishment. The realization came unexpectedly. The dragon's words were indeed true. Everything around was striking in its complete absence of the carefree atmosphere you usually expect to see on a resort island. A faint, unfamiliar scent suddenly wafted through the air, drawing Tiffany's attention to the silhouette looming ahead. Convinced that someone from the locals was standing in front of her, Tiffany looked back at the stranger. However, just by looking at the man, the girls felt their hearts break with fear. In a moment, he rushed at them. Gaze swept over the islander. Tiffany involuntarily assumed that this man had spent more than 1 month here. Mint had never seen such a creature before. Certainly none of them were found in the army. Most likely, it was a representative of the local fauna, endemic to this island. Endemics are creatures that exist only in limited areas and are not found anywhere else. Showing Kai-chan the mysterious picture, Zeke wondered if she could guess what it was. One glance was enough for Mint to recognize the enlarged image of his blood. Her intuition had not failed her. That was exactly what Zeke had shown. Now he was curious. Why did the picture look like that? Swelling in the eyes is a characteristic sign of this disease. At first, Tiffany thought she was looking at a sick monster. However, the guy immediately dispelled her doubts. He said that this was not a monster at all, but an ordinary person. The princess carefully studied the situation and began the process of cleansing ZQ, putting all her wisdom and determination into it. In the end, everything ended in healing. The islander was left in amazement, never understanding what exactly had happened. Zeke sighed happily with relief, and T met him with a friendly look and a friendly smile. A representative of the only clan that settled on Onigashima. Meeting him brought Elena genuine joy. A spark of hope seemed to flash in her heart when it became known that he had overcome a serious illness. Shizu watched her happy reaction in bewilderment. Deep down, it seemed to him that something sinister and fatal was weighing down on them. The doctor explained that it was indeed a viral infection, but thanks to diligent treatment, the patient was saved. The grateful local resident was so moved that he could not find the words to express his gratitude. Flashed through his mind. They seemed to be enveloped by a dark seal of curse. Had anyone else felt such a calamity? It turned out that the mysterious illness had affected more than just him. The plague of curse had spread to everyone, turning misfortune into a terrifying disease. It almost came close to disappearing completely. May have heard that Hanagashima was once called the Island of Peace and Harmony. Here, ancient neutrality was sacredly preserved. The locals did not get involved in wars, valued peace, and lived in peace with each other. On that day, which happened exactly 3 months ago, events unfolded so vividly that the girl instantly drew attention to them. The monster, which the old man controlled, was nicknamed the Butcher. Its terrifying essence was revealed along with a pungent stench that swept across the island, filling the air with the poison of fear. Anyone who inhaled my toxic smoke instantly became the living dead. Finally, it became clear. It was the island's inhabitants who had been poisoned by the deadly air, which had engulfed the entire area in a continuous haze. Shizuo confirmed his assumption. 9 out of 10 had ceased to be themselves, had changed just like him. Zeke came to an unequivocal conclusion. The deadly fog that they had seen from above had densely covered the island. Kai-chan was gripped by anxiety. The realization came suddenly. The air around them was already poisonous, and their own lungs were swallowing these deadly fumes. A timid storm filled the girl's heart. Should she expect the same terrible fate as the demons who were helplessly decomposing before her eyes? The thought that her breasts could simply fall off made her tremble even more. If Zeke really was going to plunge them into this madness, a quick death would be better than a slow transformation into a monster. The guy immediately tried to calm the girl down, to understand why those around them remained calm. After all, just one sip of the poisonous fumes would soon cause their bodies to feel the devastating force of decay. It turned out that his divine power was at work here, an invisible immunity that enveloped everyone nearby with reliable protection against the virus, like a living vaccine. The local resident, realizing this miracle, did not hide his delight. A real divine blessing was manifesting itself before him. To his knees in a fit of despair, recognizing Zeke as the true heavenly messenger, bringing the long-awaited salvation. His heart filled with hope, he begged to save their island. The news came as a bitter surprise to the children. They had been dreaming of this vacation. It seemed that their brother would have to forget about his dream vacation. But Zeke reassured them. It was just a request for help, a small matter that they would handle quickly and easily. The vacation would not be long in coming. The residents could not help but admire the children's unwavering determination. At the door, the guests were greeted by Seker, who now runs Onigashima. The explanation was simple. The man had extended a helping hand. Zeke called his name, and at that moment, Sakura was surprised to learn that she was standing before the famous demon lord. Snow White, whose fame had already surrounded the entire island with gossip. In Tiffany's opinion, such a nickname had a truly spectacular connotation. Meanwhile, the boy himself was sincerely surprised, because he had no idea that such a name had become attached to him. The realization that the boy was not inferior to him in intelligence forced him to apologize for possible rudeness. Zeke only calmly assured that he held no grudges. In any case, Shizuo, in turn, was not able to influence the situation at the moment. The interlocutor appreciated Zeke's frankness, thanking him for the honest description of the situation on the island. In addition, he emphasized, the warning about the castle was not in vain. It really is a place where you can feel safe. Power keeps the miasmas outside, preventing them from breaking through. But once you're outside the gates, the magical barrier no longer works. The realization came suddenly. The situation turned out to be much more terrible than imagination allowed. Terrifying things were happening in this place for the sake of Shei's training. Relief overwhelmed Shizuo. He had managed to save everyone in time and take them to a place where they were truly safe. No news. Tiloi was filled with anxiety, wondering if he was okay. Meanwhile, Shizuo couldn't muster up the courage to admit that he was lost in the crowd. It was only through a chance encounter with Mr. Zeke, who was passing by, that he managed to find his way and overcome his anxiety. His answer opened her eyes. There was a way out. A panacea was somewhere nearby. Zeke carefully explained that he could not tell all the details because the disease resembled a real epidemic. But despite the complexity, it was in his power to turn everything back and save from the disease. The servant looked at Zeke in confusion, amazed by his extraordinary ability to give people a chance to recover. No denying it, Zeke is truly unique. But this man's doubts are not dispelled, because his main feature is the ability to heal anyone. As Shizuo said, he once turned into a zombie, but completely recovered, so it is not surprising that doubts still haunt his soul. Faith barely held on to the surface. It all seemed incredible. The servants cautiously agreed. The lady was not mistaken. The siege was truly worth every minute. Mint inquired with interest what they meant. Passed. As soon as the mistress's ban on destroying zombies was issued, it became obvious to Mint. This was all a siege from which they could never escape. The audience was told the terrible truth. Each of them had either died long ago or had lost control of their own lives. The awareness of this terrible reality remained unattainable for them. They could not even guess about their own fate, calling on the ruler to reveal the truth to them. Perhaps the only way to save the situation depends on them. The girls' hearts could not help but respond to her sincere kindness. Having admitted to myself my excessive naivety, I realized, running away from difficulties and postponing them for later is futile, sheer recklessness. It is hard to imagine a politician who cannot distinguish between what is valuable and what should be left behind. There is no justification for her accusations. In this, I found no fault in her. Her kindness was the reason for the attacks, wasn't it? But now, while he was around, everyone could finally breathe a sigh of relief. His hands would restore their strength and peace.